Hey, Tammy.
How are you?
Actually, it's nice having a relaxing morning. It's been a while since I've had a relaxing morning, and Veronica and I made a kind of a Taiwanese style breakfast that I haven't had since I was a kid. Actually, recently I've had a few, but it was a childhood habit.
Yeah, what's the breakfast?
I call it soggy rice, but I guess a lot of fancy restaurants call it congee, Congee.
Yeah.
It's this rice porridge slash gruel on top of which you can put all kinds of things like raw eggs, hard boiled eggs, 1,000-year-old eggs, pickled this, pickled that, dried pork, pork sun, Taiwanese sausage, pretty much
What
everything.
what did you have on today's?
About 6 or 7 different items. We had the pork sun, some strange. It's just called gluten, but it's like meat like substitute. It's about bite-sized morsels. Pickled lettuce, pickled cucumbers, bamboo shoots, mustard greens. It's pretty cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey Sam, I wanted to know if how you felt about having our check-in separate from the actual session to
I
stop
don't
and
feel strongly one way or the other. I think it's all part of the process. So I think it's all on the record. But if we want to
it's
separate it,
all
yeah,
it's all on the record, but the purpose is so that people who are viewing it later can go right to where we began. So they don't have to, we don't have to like put a start time. Sometimes I know you say start the video. Hi, Glenn. Start the video. You kind of put the link in with the start time. But it's just a practice I'm looking to get us to do so that we can start with good beginnings. And like when people are watching it later, it's at the top. We're saying what it is that we're doing so that it's easier for people to jump in. Does that make sense?
it does. Although I think that as we evolve practice and our tools get better, we can get the same effect without necessarily cutting and stopping the video at each time. But like I
Yeah.
said, I'm not attached one way or the other right now.
And so you're open to doing that for today?
Sure.
Fantastic.
So I'm already recording, so this can be the check-in period.
Yeah. Hi, Glenn. How's it going?
Hey, it's going good.
Glenn,
Yeah. Hey.
Your audio is super low again today.
yeah, can
Oh
you
no.
do something about your microphone again, Glenn?
Yeah. Usually it helps that we just talk about it. So we'll see.
Yeah, your
But
microphone seems to be sensitive to that, quote unquote.
yeah.
Which is kind of cool.
Did you say what you just talked about? Did you talk about recording in different segments?
Yeah, we're talking about separating the check-in from the main session from the checkout, just as Tammy's developed as a habit.
I'm not sure that we need to do the checkout. I think the checkout is takeaways and all that sort of thing. We'll see. We'll see when we get there. But if we do a meta conversation about planning it, that's a good place it is good actually to separate them. I think
Yeah.
we can feel that through. And the purpose and intent is to have these be a bit more curated as a part of the practice that we do. So.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds really sensible.
But by the way, if I make each of you co-hosts, then you can each do your own recording and you can start, stop whenever you like too, right?
Absolutely, that's true. Because I've been doing so much, I have a very, very full computer. So I think it's a great practice. I personally don't have at the moment, I need to do a lot of clearing of files. And so I've got so I would prefer it be someone else at the moment. Glenn, are you able to record to your machine?
Yeah, I don't know if I don't have an account.
I actually made you co-host, Glenn. I made you a co-host, so any co-host can actually record.
So does that just download as a file?
Yeah, it creates a file.
So
I'll try to do it. Hey,
yeah.
Neil.
Mr. Davidson, Let me guess. It
Mr. David.
is it 7 a.m. in the morning for you?
Well, it's probably 7:04 by now.
You have, yeah, there.
Yeah, just
And
finding
you
my
thought
way
I
in
was the
here.
mathematician.
You got me?
Yes.
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah.
Right. Lovely.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you too. Yes, it's 7:04 in the morning, and I'm having to speak quietly because I'm downstairs from everybody sleeping. So,
So is it early enough you haven't had breakfast, or have you already had breakfast, Neil?
I just wolfed down breakfast and then realised my clock on the wall was slow, and the clock on the TV was telling me it was 5 minutes later than I thought it was. So that's why I just rushed to jump back into position. So.
It's all perfect. We're in check-in.
Yeah.
Oh, good stuff.
Yeah. Thanks.
What time
for
is
all
it for you,
of
Sam?
who are actually where Tammy and I are, it's 1:05 in the afternoon, so just after
Oh.
lunchtime.
Yesterday.
And Glenn
Yeah.
must be
Yeah,
late in the evening.
it's 10 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah.
Yeah, late evening session. Hey, Harry.
Hey.
Harry's also Central European time, yes or no?
+1, I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
Or
So it's
bang
also
on.
10 p.m. Harry's time.
Oh,
The same time as me. Yeah.
Hey,
That's
Harry.
awesome. You know, I really appreciate you guys kind of adapting to this sudden change in barn raising schedule. So this is awesome.
Yeah, it's Saturday, so it's overwork, they say here.
Well, some people cannot work on Sundays, you know, depending on their belief system. So
Some people not on Saturdays either.
that's true. That's true.
I was really happy about this because I really missed the barn racings since I couldn't do it on Tuesday. So I think this is wonderful. Yeah.
Well, you know, there's a few thoughts that we could use. Actually, Tammy wants to say something first.
yeah. So what I was proposing is that because the beginning of these are really people arriving and little check-in. So Sam, if you wanted to move on to kind of grounding our session, then we should stop and start. Because I'm suggesting that we aim for good beginnings. So that at the top of whatever session that we've got, we have an introduction so that people know what they're in for, because they're often long files, rather than starting with the kind of informal check-in that we have. So I'm suggesting that we break this into 2 parts. Oh, and Deborah's wanting to join as well. So I'm just going to get her the link. But maybe we want to just have a little bit more check-in time before you set it up as a new part and we stop and start recording. Does that make sense, Sam?
Yes, it does. I'm always willing to adopt current practice, and then we can talk later on.
Okay.
Complex systems evolve depending on how they start.
Yeah.
Oh, I was late. Oei.
Well, one of my little
Oh,
rants,
no criticism, Harry.
You're not late. You're right on time, Harry.
I don't have time. I forgot about it.
Good.
It's a totally forgotten concept these days.
And I'm making myself a cup of tea, so don't mind that.
actually, I am curious whether Deborah's having problems, because I thought I posted the right link in the announcement that I sent out.
Yeah, that's the one I went into.
Different people go to different signals. I've sent her the link, so she should be.
She's
That
here.
must be Deborah.
Yes.
Deborah is materializing. Deborah
Oh,
has materialized.
Deborah, good to see you.
We can see you putting your makeup on, Deborah. It's all right.
I think that was lip balm.
So welcome, Deborah.
I'd let my hair down too, but it wouldn't take that long.
I could let my hair down too.
I let my hair down, but I can't remember where I put it.
Okay, well, since Deborah's doing this, I'm going to be...
Oh, if you're going to do that, then all right, here we go.
I don't think all of us have been gathered together before. So this is the first time all of us are together.
Yeah, that's a question. Deborah, have you met Neil? Neil, have you met Deborah?
Yeah. Yeah, I met Neil on the first Zoom that I joined, I don't know how many Fridays ago. He happened to Zoom in.
Who is this woman? and why is she looking through my shop window and doing her hair in the window?
Why is she talking?
Again.
That's me, Neil.
Oh, sorry, I always get that mixed up.
Sam. That's
You
great.
should see me from the back, Neil.
Would I be strangely attracted, Sam? Would I?
All kinds of strange attractions around
No
here.
ponytail contest.
Sorry, I forgot. This is barn raising. We're
It's important to have fun when we're barn raising.
okay. Who brought the pitchforks? Okay.
I've got the instruction mug for how to do robot dancing here. If anybody needs to check that. Okay.
About dancing. Send me one of those. This is one of my mugs, personal fog cabinet from one of my startups way back in the early 90s. Okay, so it is already, 10 after. So shall we have a quick arrival time before we get into some context setting? Actually, literally, Tammy just arrived through her door just a few minutes ago from, Changing the World, demonstrating political issues.
There's a big demonstration gathering. I think between 6,000 and 7,000 people at the Kinder Morgan terminal, and there's speeches and all that stuff happening right now. But I went and did the walk this morning, and there was just so many gorgeous, beautiful humans showing up in solidarity with the Indigenous people here in terms of standing against the pipeline. So that was this morning, and I got to see a friend who I haven't seen in a long time because she was going, and we went together. So it's been like, I don't know, maybe 3 years since we hung out. And so it was just like yesterday because we've been friends since my early 20s. So yeah, that was my morning.
Hey, I want to say, one of my cover pictures is still from the BlackRock DAPL event. So I'm still standing in solidarity against the pipeline development all over the place, Actually, let me share something that's actually been of some consternation here on the island. I live in this paradise called Camino Island, Washington. And strangely, just 1 week ago on Saturday, a body was discovered. It was a woman's body, I think late 20s or 30s, something like that. The unusual aspect of it was found near a bunker where people had actually stashed, months worth of food and supplies and tools and that sort of thing. But her head was decapitated. So it's not the typical thing. And this is just really disturbing to find on the island, which is such an idyllic place. So anyway, I just heard yesterday or today that they had found the guy, and not surprisingly, it was the ex-boyfriend. So bad situation all around.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Sam. That's a bit of a heavy note.
And you know what? The reason I actually heard about this in the first place, not from the news, I don't actually get it from the news. I heard about it from one of Veronica's classmates that told me about it, News travels in that circle faster than it travels, in other media that I consume. So anyway, other than that, this place is paradise. But once in a while, even paradise has its little, events.
How many people live in that area, Sam?
15,000 people. It's a little island that's about maybe 20 miles north to south. And it's obviously a very odd shape, but at its widest part is probably about 8 to 10 miles wide. But I live way on the southernmost tip, about 1,000 feet from the tip. So it's very, very narrow down here. And there's very few houses, for the last 6-7 miles of the island, the houses are very sparse. And that's one of the reasons I like it. On the average day, I get anywhere from 3 to 8 cars pass by my street. That's about it.
And Sam, are you in Washington State or Oregon?
This is Washington State. Yeah, it's between Seattle and Canada.
North. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know where Coos Bay is?
I don't.
Okay.
I'll look it up.
It's a random question.
Okay. But other than that little piece of disturbing news, I have a place that I welcome each of you and all of you, one or multiple at a time, to come and visit because it's a great place to sit and have conversation. There's a fire pit out here. We can actually, look over the water. We can actually look at the eagles perching on the dead trees out there. I got 3 golden retrievers and a black cat that you can play with. So come visit anytime. You're all welcome.
You had me at eagles.
Yes. A family of 4 eagles. In fact, one of them was a juvenile about 2 years ago, and now it's quite grown. I think there's actually a new baby that just showed up. So the family is now like 5, probably.
Sam, I'll come and write book 3 there, okay?
Absolutely, okay? Yeah. Absolutely. I got to tell you, though, in full candor, I'm not a great cook. I like stir fry, okay? But, my daughter loves to cook, so that's one of the things I like about our situation here.
Yeah, maybe one day we'll all be gathered at Sam's place and have a real.
Let's set a date. Let's do it. Okay.
Live podcast.
July 3rd and 4th, 2018. Come on down.
That would be so awesome. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry for taking so much time for my check-in. I should be done.
So. Right. Should I say something, or we'll just take a little check-in round? Well, I don't have all that much to say. I had a really wonderful day, really. Was a wonderful conversation we had yesterday on Friday, and feel real inspired by that. Looked over the talk with Tammy and Michael Josefovic. That was really interesting. Amazing stuff they talked about there. So yeah, just glad to be here and looking forward to going into it.
You just want like a check-in, like how we are doing.
How are you?
Arrive.
How are you today?
Okay. All right. I am getting sucked into a black hole of my own making.
No.
I'm working hard to get out of it. And I had a really long talk with Doug, who yesterday, who was saying, you have all the power to get out of it and you need to figure it out. So I crafted a nice message to Doug this morning, and I'm still trying to recover from this bearing of soul. And but I think I gained some insights. And then I went around and I did banking with my daughter and went swimming and grocery shopping. And I'm on my way out of the grocery shopping. This woman had cut in front of me. And of course, then I'm stuck behind her and she's hesitating to make, and this old man, this really old man comes zooming in and he wants to turn and I'm blocking his way and he starts shaking his hands and he starts doing this to me. And I respond in calm. Even the most enlightened beings, as we may try to be, sink down into the depths of aggression. So that's where I'm coming from.
That's okay, Dad. That's called a digital interaction. You happy for me to say something over here? Yep. Interesting week, operating at multiple levels. I had about a 6-hour conversation over 2 days with an assistant elder of an African tribe in Kisii in Kenya, who is trying to build an orphanage for about 30 or 40,000 street kids in his region alone. So my key role there has been to listen and try and get context, because anybody can write a business plan. It's a question of, how does it satisfy the broader context? So he's waiting for me to finish here so that I can review the business plan. He's hoping I'm going to rewrite it in a way that's going to make sense. And I'm not sure whether I can be of any assistance at all, but he's loving the mentorship from afar and the insights. Secondly, the group that I've been doing some work with, the Blue Ring, which is into landscape scale remediation, is part of a consortium that a chap from New York from the Vihara Foundation visited the British Virgin Islands for about a week, finishing up just the other day. And he has secured an MOU for the consortium to be assisting with the recovery after 2 hurricanes and storm surges. So not sure what that will transcribe into yet, there's contracts and who else is involved, but myself and others from Australia could be involved in helping with the complete rebuilding of the British Virgin Islands as an exemplar for multiple other places in the world, and building it back better, not just building it back stronger. So I've even written applications around anti-fragility, not just how do we build it back stronger. And apparently they loved all that stuff. So they're really desperately looking for assistance because they know it's going to happen again. And third, I went to a multi-faith session yesterday on climate change with 4 speakers. I think it's important to continually check in to see where people are at in their thinking. There was a chap who works with the coal industry, but is a very strong Muslim, was talking about the technical aspects of the geology and the coking coal, but still blind to the fact that we can't afford to burn any more coal. So it was an interesting dynamic in the room, given we also had people that had chained themselves to fences and been arrested for trying to stop the Adani coal mine, which is the massive one that, if it goes ahead, will single-handedly decrease the amount of available carbon window we have in the atmosphere by 2%. And we had a young Muslim woman speaking on being a vegan, which is a pretty challenging leadership role for a 20-something-year-old Muslim to be talking about veganism to a male-dominated church that's still very much into eating meat. We had a chap who'd lived for 10 years in slums in Delhi with his 2 now teenage sons and wife in a room about 5 meters by 3 meters, and talking about carbon footprint and how he'd reduced his in Australia and there. And we had who was the 4th one? Off the top of my head, forgotten the 4th one, that'll come back to me. But the interesting thing there is that I learned a new term of amicus curiae, which I hadn't heard before, which apparently is the truth teller in a court session. The person that is holding the responsibility of speaking on behalf of fairness if they believe evidence that should have been presented hasn't been presented, or on behalf of somebody that can't be present. And the reason that came up was that after I spoke and summarised on behalf of a group in the room, multiple people came to me to talk to me about what I was doing and how I was doing it, loved everything I was doing, could see what I was doing, which was linking across the faiths and across the disciplines. And that's the term that came out of the legal side of who. So I know that I'm court jester, amicus curiae, disruptor, but in a way that I think is actually allowing cohesion for those that can see the need to do that at a higher level. And I'm doing that in multiple places. So it's an interesting, very tricky space, no guarantees. But I come here in the context of also having made some comments last night on LinkedIn, on Facebook before I went to bed, and understanding that, I am playing a role which is controversial in this group, and I'm very keen to see how I can fit in or not, because there are many other places where my skills might be needed. And if this group isn't able to grasp the difficulties that others that I know are grasping at multiple levels, then I'll be touching in occasionally, but I can't spend a huge amount of time. So thanks.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. I like that you mentioned the word truth teller. Basically, I got in the first real serious work as a graphic facilitator. I already were kind of convinced with that term, that my role is to tell the truth or to mirror that. So I like it very much. I had a lovely Saturday. I basically lived behind my screen trying to catch up with everything that erupts from just reading a few Facebook pages. And I got all these tabs open and I want to know everything. And I tried to, basically I'm trying to kind of capture how collaboration would really work, and that was the discussion in the last session as well. But kind of trying to graphic it and start with a small image I posted already, and then it kind of grows. I can't make it very sharp, I know, but don't worry about it. It's just to say that how to show how my diagram works, and this is trying to capture if there's any value. I'm not there yet, but and I was very happy to see Glenn responded by another image as well about the WeSpace. So I'm having I was also kind of brainwashed by Doug about my belief system. So I feel okay, and better than yesterday. Of course, I'm still, if you let go of the limiting beliefs you kind of constructed when I was so little, then life starts, it's like having new glasses, so to speak. These are old ones. Okay, with that I'm in for the moment. Thank you.
So I forget, is that everyone? Everyone has entered and presented?
I'm curious because we've kind of started getting into it, if we do stop and start or not. Will of the group.
To me, you are a master of ceremony, Timmy. I don't mind.
I think that we can maybe take this as a teaching moment in terms of, like, what is the beginning? So I feel like we've already begun. So I would feel like we just carry on. But in future, I'd like us to consider, like, we have the coffee clutch moment where we're all arriving in the space, and at a moment, it actually starts. So let's feel for that moment and shoot for the edit next time.
If I may.
You go first, Harry.
Yeah. It also is, I see there's a lot of events, then you have a kind of a set time to start. So we will start at 8, and then you can half an hour before you can kind of check in. And then you let the clock decide, and then if people are too late, that's their problem. And it takes some time for people to get disciplined, but it works very well, at least in Switzerland.
Sounds good.
Are there any themes that you've thought about to talk about today? Neil mentioned many interesting things, of course, but just love to hear.
I'd love to give Sam a chance to kind of frame how he would like, seeing as how he's stewarding the session.
I'd be more than happy to. I think Neil had his hand up, though, as Harry was speaking.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to say, and it's not to challenge where things go, but a check-in is critical. It doesn't matter what you try and do afterwards if you haven't authentically checked in. I did my best to frame it in terms of the multiple levels I'm working at and the complexities, the difficulties, the grieving, the opportunities. All of these things are simultaneous. And so if you don't know that about me, then I can't operate with you. Where's he coming from? So I'm a mess. The people around me are a mess. There's people that think they've got it handled and they haven't. And unless we are really authentic and I think honest in that when we start, not just, hi, I'm here and I've had a cup of coffee, I think, this is the grist. If we don't have that, we can't put the pieces together because we don't know where the bits are that don't fit. So forgive my rawness, but to me a check-in is about the authenticity of showing up whole or broken and telling people where you're at. And if you can't do that, then how can you trust me to say the right thing at the right time or respond in ways that you might expect? So my responses could be anywhere from here to here today. I'm not aiming there. And if you tell me where to aim, I'll do my best to bring it back to that. And that's what I'm looking for next.
I really appreciated your check-in, Neil, and your seriousness and authenticity. So I find that very inspiring.
Also, the persistence with which you offer your services and insight, so that those of us who are at times able to grasp some of it can loop you in when we feel that it's something that we actually can comprehend. And I know that varies from time to time. Even I'm too busy to even catch up on all the Facebook threads. There's just way too many, Sometimes I disappear for 10 hours and there's 85 messages, so I don't know how to catch up with stuff like that. Hey, but one practice that Tammy and I were experimenting with this week was to sort of see how we might sort of thread together some of the conversations. We go from Tuesday to Thursday to Friday to Saturday. And in particular, between yesterday and today, it was an opportunity to find some continuity, especially around the fact that yesterday we talked about who we are, what we're bringing, and what we want to build together. And one of Neil's diagrams that I referred to in a conversation with Tammy was this. It's not necessarily concentric. It didn't draw it that way because it was oval shaped, but it was starting from a why, expanding to a what, and then going through various of the 5 or 6 other kinds of question types. But I thought it might be good to sort of at least think about and feel what is the why that we're here and what is the what that we might want to create out of that why. Because I think that's what, to me, barn raising is asking the questions about, what does a barn look like? Is it gonna, house horses? Is it gonna have a heater? Is it gonna have a foundation? So I was just wondering if we might just take a chance take a round at just the why of what it is that we want to do here, and use that to sort of seed this conversation, and use that as an approach. Tammy, you want to say more? Because I think you and I both had that conversation yesterday and this morning.
Yes, thank you. Awesome. Check. Why? Why are we here?
So I can, since I posed the question, I might even offer to go first. And I'll say something that's a little bit briefer than what I normally present, okay? I'm here to try and see if I can disprove my very good friend, Ted Nelson. Now, Ted's a genius. And he's the son of 2 media moguls. And his life is about creating media and creating, creative artifacts of genius. Yeah, that's the diagram, the why first and then the what coming next. So one of Ted's theses is, even though many of us, beginning with Doug Engelbart and even before Doug and certainly after Doug, we believe that collectively we can be more intelligent, we can be more capable, but the ingredients, the seeds of that, the how-to of that, the practices, the principles, the showing up, the presencing, the personal preparation of all of that hasn't yet been well enough understood so that we can consistently take groups and produce works of genius greater than Ted can produce on his own. So even though we believe that collectively we have this massive generative potential, this massive brain power, experience base, values base, skill set, it's still hard enough for us to really understand how to put that together, how to get the best from each other, and produce works of art, works of governance, works of society, works of social construct that can even equal, if not exceed, that a certain genius might produce on their own. That's the thesis I'm here to explore. Can we figure that out? Can we put that together ourselves, explore that, learn it, practice it, show it, and then eventually produce using it, and then demonstrably say, yes, this is better than any single one of us geniuses could have produced together. And that's what I'm here to experiment with. That's what I would like. That's the why that I am here. And it also, of course, implies the what. So let me close with that statement.
Can we land in some of Neil's work and read it out and then de-share our screen so we can have that deeper connection seeing all of us? Because I'm reading the words and I missed a bunch of what Sam said because of the focus. Neil, can you read it out for us?
Yes,
Or at
certainly
least the
can.
first two ovals. How about that? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, and forgive me. I thought, given the context, it would be best to share the diagram rather than try and describe the diagram to multiple separate minds. And this is, again, part of the issue you just mentioned, Sam. If we're not on the same page, if we're not looking at the same map, if we haven't defined the same landscapes, then very hard to know whether we're talking about the same thing, even though we assume we're talking about the same thing. So that's the first step. But the why, this is a diagram from Michelle Holliday down the bottom here from Cambrian that some of you may know on Facebook. She's written the book Thrivability. I just added the extra one here with her permission, and I think she's using this as well now. But the why, as you can see there, who are we? Which is authentically. What calls to us? Why are we here, right? What unites us and connects us with both our reverence and our responsibility? So if you are conscious enough to actually deeply feel into what you're on the planet for, what is it that connects us? If I know my purpose and you know your purpose, where's the overlap? What's alive in the center that we want to nurture and grow? Why here, why now? And so that is what Sam was just saying, I think, about what is it we can do together that we can't do alone. So that's, to me, the starting question is, why are we gathered here right now at this time, in my case, on a Sunday morning? The next question then is where Sam was then going, is what? What are we called to do and learn at whatever scale? So in this small group today, or in this small group on behalf of a larger community, or in this small group on behalf of the planet, right? And what is our gathering, invitation, and quest? And that's where Sam was just going. The how, what conditions and practices will serve us on our quest and what has to be true. Tammy, as Sam was saying, Master of Ceremonies, in this particular case, what are the things that we ought to be doing that don't detract from what we're here for? And what are those rules? And I've been one of the ones that's been asking, what is the rules of barn raising? What are we trying to achieve here? So forgive me if I overstep those marks. I'm still trying to get a definition of what that is. And it's very hard to work together if you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. How much? What will it be along the way, and what constitutes enough? So at what time do we turn off the diagram because it was the wrong thing at the wrong time? And how do we know when we've actually reached a conclusion? And some of the Facebook discussions recently were around trying to answer a question, and how will we have answered the question? How will we know when we've answered the question? And the question that I asked at the end is, how well have we done all of that? And that becomes self and system awareness. If I felt I got something out of it, was that just an egotistical, hand clap, silent hand clap to myself? Or, is it actually a recognition that we collectively are better than we were when we started because of that collective intelligence and collective interest? So what should we change in our individual why, who, where, what, how, and how much? Or in our group, why, who, where, what, and how much, to serve the whole system we're stewarding? And then the key question then, this one that comes up for me regularly, is in terms of the global challenges, collaboration, is the whole system the globe, or is it a project? Now that comes down to definition of the why. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll take the diagram off unless people want to talk to that. So just let me know, but thanks for the opportunity to speak to it.
Are there any questions for Neil about the diagram?
Not a question, but one interpretation I have is, I would caution, and I'm hoping that this is something that can resonate with some of you, rather than treating this as kind of a waterfall model. In other words, first do the why, then do the what, then do the how, then do the how much, then do the how well. I prefer to do this in a spiral, or kind of in a push the envelope at all levels kind of a way, in an iterative fashion, because you're never going to get any single step correct. But in any step, you have to do, this is what we, not I, but what we understand is the why. This is what we understand as a what. This is how we understand as how. Or we can take an individual approach to this. This is why I understand I'm here. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to do things, et cetera, and then iterate on that. And hopefully over time, then we can see some interesting connection. But that's my only caveat, is I would prefer not to treat this as a waterfall, do this and then do that model. Over.
If I can just clarify, it's not intended as a waterfall. It's actually an iterative process, but well spotted. To me, it's like running up a creek bed. You know broadly where you want to go, but if you step on a rock and it goes the wrong direction, you've just changed your whole pathway. So all of these things are presented. If you don't see the whole, you can't navigate. And if you don't see the parts, you can't change your balance.
I was going to ask, is it may be possible that people come in into the process at different points, depending on what their awareness is, and that the different circles probably run back and forth and inform and feed each other. So I think that's what you were saying, Sam. It seems to me that it is a circle, and there's different levels of the circle, but the circle is constantly shaping itself and getting and comprehend. And these help us comprehend what's inside. Maybe.
I mean, one way to answer that question is imagine that we're still together 2, 3, 4 years from now. Hopefully something, more than just a single diagram is what we're talking about. Hopefully there's a whole lot more stuff that we've produced by then. So yes, people would be coming in with a lot of stuff already kind of underway with momentum as a foundation. So to me, it just seems like part of that model is how do we incorporate various skills of various people when they actually do arrive and find opportunity to contribute or find, that they are excited to contribute.
Just,
and
sorry, go first, Glenn.
Yeah, thanks for sharing this. I really love this diagram, and the challenge that I feel that you're bringing here is real seriousness about the situation, about the whole situation in the world, and to really ask that basic question: what is the purpose of what we're doing here? What is the larger context? And that's the natural starting point. And I didn't say that earlier, but for me at least, it is the whole planet which we are living on, which is influencing us in any case, and which is the context. So for me, that is quite obvious that the whole situation, it has to be dealt with somehow, because this is the situation we're in. But then, of course, it's very complex, so it's hard for any of us to really understand it, and we have all kinds of biases, and we see it from different perspectives. But these are just the kind of questions that I want to look more at and understand better. So yeah, this is fantastic. Really appreciate it.
So 2 minor logistical issues. Has everybody got a view of this well enough so that we can actually return to gallery view so we can see each other? Okay. And then second is, I know that at least I asked the why and the what of what brings each of us here. And I gave since I asked the question, I wanted to at least offer my response to that. And I know that's already started some conversation around that particular contribution. But I just wanted to see if others wanted to take that opportunity to bring in why they are here and what they are here to help us, do together and create together. So I just want to perhaps return us to that question if some of you would like to take that opportunity.
Yeah, Sam, can I just check in first that what you're referring to here? And again, it comes down to context, because I'm not jumping in because I don't know what you're actually trying to achieve yet. So if this group, and I'm showed up on a Sunday morning for the first time in multiple months or weeks, has a particular intention, and that needs to be stated, then I know whether I'm in the right place. With newcomers coming in, they need to know we're all in this building doing this, but if you're after this particular project, go to room on the 3rd floor, right? And so is this the room? Is this the definition of the whole organization? Is this the definition of the global problems? Right? So scale is critical. Time is critical. Temporally, is this today, or is this week, or is this for the next month, or is this for the future of humanity, right? And so I need to know how that is currently framed by this group, and I'll remain silent until I understand that, because that's my contribution today. Thanks.
I'd also like to just say thank you for sharing your screen And I really appreciate that we all had an opportunity to actually take it in. And that's what I was signaling, is that part of what we're doing here is managing information flows. And so what I was noticing in my body is that I didn't hear what Sam said because I was reading your diagram. Other people would have had that experience too. And I also couldn't see everyone. And it's also, I think, really important for us to receive people's information. So I'm really grateful that we did have a moment to really look deeply into it so that we can do this co-context setting together. And in terms of that, our practice has been in emergent co-convening, really. So depending on who's in the room, that's why the check-ins are so important at multiple levels. You know, there's the hi, I'm here today, and this is what I'm leaving behind me, and we often do that. But it's also, yeah, this co-intending that we're in right now is a big part of what is creating that identity as an emergent. So I just wanted to put my finger on that in terms of where we are in our process.
Okay, can I give it a try? I made a screen dump of, and I saw your diagram before, Neil. Thanks for that one. So I'm looking at it underneath the gallery view on my large screen. In trying to answer all those questions at once, it's about the world and it's about me at the same time. Because who am I and how do I navigate this world and live in the world as the best version of Harry? And how do I create the world around me as the best version of the world that can be? And what brought me here, I've said this before, is that I'm trying to find out how we can, on a worldwide scale, have good conversations, understand each other, and then collaborate. So I'm still trying to grasp that. And because it's extremely complex, it has many levels, I kind of go back to the principles behind it in order to grasp those.
There's two Sams here. No. Okay, I can say a few words. No, I think that was great, Harry. Thank you. Well, why I'm here is because my general impression is that it's a very special time in history, and it's a very unique situation in the world where everything depends on everything else, and I'm a part of it, obviously, and my life is a part of it one way or another. So I'm trying to figure out what is my best role to play in the situation, and if I can contribute something of value, whatever that might be. And in terms of what I see that could be, I have many ideas. I've been thinking a lot for many, many years, and have all kinds of grand visions of possibilities. So I've always been looking at possibilities from primarily a philosophical level, been doing research here and there, trying to understand some of the basics, and it's a lot. So that's the challenge. It's a very complex situation, which I'm trying to understand. But the general impression I have is that there seems to be a situation in the world which is, in a sense, deeply dynamic, where there's many possibilities of creating a new path, and where if we could gather the intelligence, the talents, the resources, which already exist, and the minds and hearts and bodies of people. And if we could find a better way of working together as humans, collaborating together, talking together, thinking together, and possibly even a better kind of science, a better kind of media, a better culture, then there seems to be amazing possibilities which exist today, and possibly has always existed and maybe will for some time, but doesn't mean that it will happen. So there's obviously lots of chaos in my life around me. It's seems to me an unpredictable situation, but at the same time, I just have to find a way to maneuver through it somehow, just take it for what it is. But I'm also very unsure about facts I hear about what's happening. I feel there's so much propaganda, there's so much information, and I don't really know what to trust. So that's a challenge in itself. So why I'm here is also to meet other people who want the same as me and who are concerned in trying to understand more about this and about the possibilities for doing something in the situation which can be beneficial somehow. And if we don't know what that is, figure out what that could be and have a learning process which can get us there someday. And I would wish to try to find an approach where I don't have to speculate about what I don't understand, and to somehow focus on being in a way which can bring value. And I hope to learn more about that, and more about how to work with other human beings and how to think about systems. And obviously the relationship between information technology and humans is also something which to me seems to be an important part of all this. And I also feel inside that there's a greatness in all, and I see so much greatness in all of you and everything you bring, and that really gives me hope. And I feel that hope is really rational. It's real hope. It's real possibility when we're together. So for me, I feel this process itself is very valuable at the moment. Just us meeting together, sharing together, learning together, exploring the possibilities. I obviously hope that it will just grow and much more will come out of it, and that we can get to very specific projects. And I have many ideas for that, and I know all of you have many ideas for that. I also feel that the foundations has to be good. So that's where I feel that we're at now, and that where I want to contribute what I can. So yeah, I think I'm about there now.
I'll give it a shot. 6 years ago, maybe 7, I decided to do something I thought I'd spent my whole life telling myself I couldn't do. And that was write a book. And I gave myself many, many reasons why I couldn't do it. And I prevented myself from doing it for 50 some years, 40, whatever, for a long, long time. And I finally sat down to do the book, and it has just been an incredible journey. The book is about climate change and consciousness, and we are going to go over the edge. We are going over the edge. And the only thing that's going to save us is each and every individual in this room and around the whole entire planet. And we have to find a way to learn how to collaborate on a level that is just never been done before. And that's why I'm here. That's why, that is what I think we need to do. We need to find tools, and we need to create a safety net. And we can only do it with us and with our consciousness, and help others raise their consciousness in whatever means we can figure out how to do. Because if we, and many people have done this, tried this before, many, we're out of chances. If we don't find a way to figure out how to come together, to combine our talents, to smooth out our frictions, to deal with the stupid man that wanted to run into me driving too fast in the parking lot, and how to deal with just, anger, emotion, trumps, the poor girl that washed up on the beach with her head, the poor man in South Africa was training for a triathlete, and people just tried to saw his legs off. I mean, we are a fallen creature in so many ways, but we also have the solution inside of each and every one of us, and we can heal each other. So that's why I'm here. And that's what I think this group can do. And I think that's what we're trying to figure out. What are the tools, and how do we create? To me, really, it's a net of consciousness that can, because we're divided. The world is literally splitting apart because of human nature, I guess. And we need to find a way to help heal and bring it back together, or at least stop it from splitting apart. And I think we can do it with each other. So.
I'm here because I believe we can collaborate towards massive, gorgeous, chaotic system and consciousness change. I think it's happening. And I have a deep feeling inside of me that we're all here in this moment for a reason. They may be divergent, but they're all connected. And that I have things that I'd like to offer. And I am surrounded by human beings that are incredibly inspiring and have done so much work to craft their ideas in ways that can make a difference and be shared. And I've really been deeply considering what, order of operations, what's first and what's next. And what communication is, and how we are connected together, and how we communicate together, and those very human ways that we are coming from the system that's competitive into this shared space where we need to do the work to widen the pipe of our understanding of what we hold together. And so, my practice has been to listen and to really notice and invest in people who inspire me in terms of the work that they're doing, so that we can see each other. and share information in a way that serves each other and supports each other to be able to understand our context, that changing context depending, because we can't, the context is everything that is. And so how do we narrow that context to something that we can understand and spend long enough listening to each other so that we can actually feel that in our hearts and know how to respond and take action from there. So, I deeply, deeply feel the place that we are in the planet, both from my own small place of Tammy Lee Meyer that's, looking to invest in this, in people so that they can share what it is that they're up to. But also from a place of recognizing and seeing the multiple scales of chaos that are all around us. And my first steps is in understanding that with the people that I'm with. So massaging the tensions that arise when we think that agreements is a bad word. Looking deeply underneath what that word means to me and why, because the reason why there's a challenge for that word is really important to look at. And together we can understand more deeply, those cultural tensions that are around us that we need to know how to deal with in relationship to each other. Recently, I did a deep dive with a local group that I'm involved with, the Working Group on Indigenous Food Sovereignty. And one of the really, really grabbed my heart was kin-centric. And so starting where we are and moving out to our circles of kin. And you are all family to me. And so this for me is family finding each other to lean in together towards the change that is emergent from within us, moving into a collective. And so it's connected to everything. It requires me to be really present and notice where I'm maybe not listening, or where I have a question that needs to be asked. It's burning in me, but it might feel like it's out of flow to ask it, but it's burning in others too. And so I'm learning how to be more comfortable with saying, this is what I need to know right now, or hold on, I'm confused about this. Because it's a natural process of understanding, and I'm clocking how others might come into this space to understand as well. And so that was Wild and Woolly, complexity, and I'm here to show up for this with all of you and serve in the best way that I can.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Has everybody had a chance? I think I've lost track.
That was some whys. Do we want to do some weaving with our whys? Is there any harvest that we want to do at this point from that? Sorry, Sam.
Can you hear me? Because I think I'm frozen. Okay.
You're good.
Okay.
Can I just make an observation, if I could? Thank you all for sharing, but I haven't heard anything different in each of the starting sessions of the last. And you start divergently, you reconverge, and you ultimately say, and what next? And I don't know what next. The intentions are here. We're feeling into this space. I appreciate that we're kin and try to work with that. And I love kin. The lovely On Being series, and Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about in the Anishinaabe language from, I presume, part of your part of the world there, Tammy, has ki at the end of one of their words, Bamid's ki or something like that. But she wants to use the word ki to refer to those other than human beings. And so the consciousness that comes with the other than human component that isn't represented in the room here, that consciousness of how do we work on behalf of the planet and what does that look like in our next actions. So when I came today, I was expecting to be given some instructions on today's barn raising is, right? And this is what we're trying to achieve. No, I get that. I can see Tammy shaking. But I thought that would be a structure because there's multiple types of meetings now. I don't see the guidelines for what room am I in to do what here now. I don't know what I'm supposed to contribute now. I'm here because I'm trying to find out how do I best contribute. I believe strongly in each of your individual presences, but I don't see any go forward. And then I've got to ask, why am I in the building? So I'm just being honest with you here that to me, I'm seeking how do I fit, because I can fit in other places and there's a guy in Kenya waiting for me to finish reading his business plan. Why would I be here with this kin rather than with another kin somewhere else when I'm doing it on behalf of the whole kin and key, and where do these pieces fit together? So to me, what I'm lacking is the how are we going to move forward? So my question to you is, do you really trust each other yet? Because I keep hearing the same things coming out again and again. If you know where the people are coming from, then why aren't you moving forward? Because if we already know where we're all coming from, why aren't we going further faster? Why are we in this room rather than our own local communities right now? Well, it's because there's something in this place which is more than I can currently get outside my window at 7 o'clock in the morning. My community is going to fail. They're a wonderful community, but they're not a community. They're a bunch of people living in a socio-demographic enclave. There's no real mechanism for cohesion, and it's to do with worldviews and difference. And so if we're going to define something different, we have to show what it is we've defined. And I'm sorry, but truth teller, just trying to say this is what I sense coming in snapshot, fresh eyes.
Can I just Can I make a suggestion? And I think it speaks to what Tammy, what everyone, and especially what Neil has just said. I created a concept paper for creating a meta narrative for the GCC. And it's very synergistically to what Neil, you said. I had posted something and you had sent me something about systems. Is this correct? Managing and working with systems. And I put this in a Google Drive and I can make it, I shared it with you, Glenn, and Tammy and Doug, but I could share it with everyone in this room so that everyone could go in to look at this concept paper for the next steps that we need to do to create a meta narrative for what we are as the GCC. And what I'm saying, why I think a narrative is important is because a narrative is a device that we can use to focus our time and attention and help us figure out what is next and where are we taking this thing. And it also, it should work from the individual person. Each one of us should be like a bubble in that narrative. And then it should encompass the work groups that have sprung out of the GCC, but then it should have the meta narrative of what the GCC is. And this should have the capacity for it to perceive itself. And I think that's what you're getting at, Neil, is what does this global collaborative look like? How should it function? And how can we first operate very well among us as individuals, but ultimately we need to bring a lot more people into a network like this. And so we need systems, tools, ways of communicating, ways of working out conflict that probably haven't existed on this level or have existed for very short periods of time and have evaporated. We need to find a way to make a collaborative system that actually gets work done and pushes consciousness or drives, helps local and world communities solve crises, because we are going over the cliff. We are facing massive species extinction in decades or so, followed by huge environmental catastrophes that's going to impact every human being on the planet. And people are going to be desperate for tools. So we can, I think we can do it. But we do need a plan. My concept paper is very baby, and it could very much use everybody's input to make it stronger. But I'm willing to put the work in but I'll need other writers to help do this. And I've already passed it by Rama, and she agrees that my idea of putting in content into Thor space will work. So that would be a place where we can capture information and get back to that information when we need it to accelerate and expand our work. But that's just one offering I can do. I think it's maybe a board. I'm offering a board for the barn.
Yep. So I actually would like to say a few things in response. And I would first say, Neil, this observation that you're making is actually quite familiar. In fact, sometimes I make this observation myself. But there are at least 4 things that I've noted that have seemed to come into play. One is, and this is part of why I introduced this session as kind of this continuity opportunity from yesterday's discussion. It wasn't an accident that Tammy used the example, what is an agreement and why does this word agreement trigger some and not trigger others? And that was definitely in play in yesterday's session. So to me, I actually don't hold negative connotations to this word agreement. But there are some who hear agreement and immediately bring in all of this other negative stuff about contracts, about penalties, about terms, about details, about paperwork, about commitments, about obligations, about legal structures and all of that, where I don't see all of that in this very simple word called agreement. And so I think agreements can be very enabling, very empowering, if all parties to an agreement see, yes, this will help me get done what I want to get done. This will help us get done what we want to get done. That to me is a healthy way of looking at an agreement. Another thought I had is those of us who have really tried to think about this problem for a while, and I think that includes almost everybody here, probably has had fairly mature solutions that they've evolved on their own and also working with others. And I think that's one example of this smart people problem, is because each of us come with these fairly mature positions, which are very difficult to present in 5 or 10 minute bites, you know? So when we get an opportunity to get into a large conversation, large meeting, let's say 5, 6, 7, or 12 of us, and we get an opportunity to present maybe the abstract of what it is that we have been thinking about, without even going into chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 20, already there's a chance to diverge because every one of us is looking for that opportunity to introduce that abstract. And then we're all not yet able to dig in and double click and figure out, you know, where each one of them has a lot of ramifications, a lot of implications, a lot of mature thought already going in. So that's observation number 2. It's a form of the smart people problem. Third is there seems to be a locus of energy, a focus of thought around how we be with each other, and is less interested in actually creating the artifacts that would indicate agreement or indicate specificity or indicate some kind of a charter. And I think I've noticed this on a couple of occasions, multiple occasions, And in response to that, what people have been saying is, well, just go ahead and do it. Okay. So I myself felt unblocked by saying, okay, so here's what I'm going to write up as my CCC to Tammy. Here's what I'm going to write up as a how-to for how we add people to Facebook, how we determine who's active, how we make decisions, how we make revisions, how we create media, how we, et cetera, et cetera. So there's about a dozen of these how-tos that I've created that are my own offerings. I'm not indicating that those are agreed upon by anybody, but those are at least my offerings that people can consider to say, okay, do we want to build on this, or is there something better that we can create out of this starting point? So that's my attempt to try and get something that could be kind of a living way of indicating that work or thought is being done and is being captured. The next thought here is each of us comes with different stages of thought around what it is that we're trying to do. As you've indicated, some of us who have been thinking about this for many years and possibly multiple decades are fairly aware of what the downfalls, pitfalls are, etc. And some may be wanting to discover things from axiomatic principles and from the ground zero. And there's this disconnect at where we have the conversation. In theory, it's good to start at ground zero so we know that we're having a sound basis, for creating what it is that we want to create together. On the other hand, for some, that looks like a lot of wasted time. So there's that difficulty. And then the last point I would say, and then I'll shut up, is Deb, I really, really want to encourage you to take that paper, and regardless of who helps you with that paper, do it, okay? Because I'm saying this to everybody. Glenn should be doing it, I should be doing it, Tammy should be doing it, Harry should be doing it, Neil should be doing it, Deb, you should be doing it, and don't yet feel a need to position as the GCC. This is my take on what we're here for to do, okay? My take on what I'm here to do, my take on what GCC could be. And I think if we have enough of those, then we can start looking at areas where we have some commonality or some alignment, pick one or two themes, and maybe those become that which takes root. So I'm trying to take a view that says, in some way, I kind of understand why things are the way they are. I kind of have a low level of impatience, not a high level, but a low level of impatience around why we haven't created more artifacts and why we haven't even figured out what agreement means. And then I'm going to close with this one question, okay? Imagine a random group of people, whether it's 6 of us here or all 240 of us in GCC, okay? So take scenario A. They're all random. They're all doing what they want. They all produce a set of work. They all impact the world in some way. Okay, call that scenario A. Scenario B, okay, let's take a look at scenario B. That's if we can figure out how we help each other, how we connect with each other, how we synergize and cohere with each other and resonate with each other, and I apply those practices and principles and bring to bear some tools so that we can actually do something that maximizes our impact. Okay? I'm here to work on scenario B, and I want to ask the question, if B were to be real, how much more effective could we be than scenario A, and what would we have to do? It's another way of asking the question, can we prove that together we could be more genius than Ted Nelson? And if that were the case, what do we have to put in place? What agreements do we have to make together? What kind of artifacts do we have to produce? What protocols do we use? What questions do we ask? When do we incorporate new members? When do we decide to make rules? When do we decide to change rules? When do we decide to kick out members? When do we decide that, we've produced enough? Those are all questions that I would like to ask. Starting with the question that I think we had yesterday was, why is agreement such a dangerous word? And I'll close there. Over.
Thank you. That was a lot of things here. I just had a little question to Neil. I really like when you say, why isn't it moving faster? And I try to really take that challenge, and there's a part of me that really likes that and feels that that's actually the most important question that I have to ask myself all the time. At the same time, I do see that there's a progression to just the fact that we're together, and having been a part of it, I feel that things have developed in certain directions which seem very promising, even without explicit agreements. And yet there has been many agreements, like we're using Zoom, we're speaking English, we're members of the Facebook group, we have certain manners of how we speak. So obviously we've shown that we already can make agreements, and the main agreement has been that we show up to these conversations. Just like you said, Tammy, we will show up here, and when we're here, magic happens. I just feel it's happening, and exactly what direction it will take is to some know. At the same time, we need the structure, we need to progress. So I guess the question, I simply wonder, what do you think, Neil, as you see it from the outside? What do you feel would be needed for us? What would you feel could be a next natural step to move things forward?
If that's okay with the group to respond to that and to Sam. Firstly, it's not feeling from the outside, it's positioning myself on the outside to look back in. So I don't feel like an outsider, I make myself an outsider so I can observe. And this is a consciousness issue. It's I in it, I in us, I in we, I in the whole system. And if you can't zoom in and zoom out, then you're not going to see those different things from a critical thinking perspective. So if anybody was watching us climbing up a cliff, where are the safeties? If we fell off, would anybody notice? Right. So how do we know how far we've gone? How can we show how far we've been? We've written virtually no graffiti on the side of the wall. As far as I can see, there's no safeties. And if this group disbands for whatever reason, where is the record? You would argue, yes, there's video, but who's then going to come and find the video in the vault, dig it out and look at the video and see where to from here? How could anybody come in new and pick up the pieces and say, this is where I want to go? I had an interesting interchange last night with somebody who was having fun at my expense when I brought back in the levity of the situation, who looked like a newcomer. I don't know him, forgive me if he's been around longer, but if a newcomer comes in and accidentally and playfully creates havoc, you know, do you take the child out of the china shop? Because if we're at a stage of delicate development and trustworthiness, then how do we govern those who don't quite get what we're doing yet? And how do we justifiably do that if we haven't defined what we were in the room for? We're here to trash the place. So in that case, go for it, you know. No, we're here to create something. In that case, be careful what we've already created. So to me, Deb and I had a conversation, quite a long conversation, but a wonderful conversation. And Deb stayed up till 3 a.m, I think. So I hope you've recovered, darling. So about a 4 or 5 hour conversation a couple of weeks ago. It feels like a couple of weeks ago. It's probably about 3 to 4 days ago. But we talked about, again, that ORID process. And these are, like, I'm trying to work out how to do my hands, weaving. So you start divergent and then you come back to convergent. But you can do that in one session, or you can do that in multiple sessions, or you could weave it like a DNA strand. And so my sense is that what you've just done here, Glenn, is exactly at regular points through these conversations, we say, let's reflect on what we've just done. Okay? When we reflect on what we've just done, what do we agree is the next stage? So we're collectively demonstrating minor small-scale agreements on the next step in this conversation based on its starting context and where we think it wants to go. At each point, each of us has a say in, do we want to go that way or that way? Or is there something in between? At the moment, it can go anywhere and the strands go, and that's fantastic. But if we're trying to show progress, we need to show that's where we started, we diverged, we came back together, that's the point of agreement. Then you could label point of agreement for conversation such and such was this. You can find that, you can reference it, you can go back and write it into Deborah's paper, right? But you need some structure. So my sense is that we could reach that mechanism through as simple as this, having a regular point every 10 minutes or so, waiting for the right moment and saying, can we just check in now? Are we still going according to what we said we were going to do at the start? Because when Sam said that a minute ago, I admit I'd almost forgotten what he said at the start about the reason we were here and testing whether individual brilliance could beat collective intelligence, right? There is no question individual intelligence will always beat collective intelligence. If you can't get people to agree, that doesn't really matter. So it doesn't matter how good the expert is, doesn't matter how good the intelligence is. If nobody's coming with you, you're out there on your own and you're about to fall off the cliff. You know, and Doug Englebart's probably an example of that, and Sam's picked up the ropes and started on the climb again. There's many people I know that have tried and failed. You know, most prophets were crucified for what they said, and then 300, 400 years later became the ones that were recognized as having changed the direction of the planet. So the challenge we've got is to show our working in progress, not just do the work. And we have to show where we've touched base. So to me, what are the mechanisms for simply capturing, not just in a continuous stream, because you made the point before, this is an iterative process. It's not just a continual stream of consciousness, it's a continual stream of consciousness with punctuated equilibrium and reflection to capture what we've just learnt at this point in time. That's what I do in spoken conversations in meetings, and people go, oh wow, it lifts the game. But there's no guarantees on where it's going to go at the start, because you're working with what's come up in that immediate period prior to, so there's no direction. The agreement is not we're going to make it happen, but we're going to do our best we can with the pieces we have in the room. And at each point we're saying, are we doing the best we can, and is there another way we could look at this? That's my sense, but I'll leave that up to others to judge whether I'm on the right track. And thanks, Sam. Forgive me, I've got my glasses off so you can see my eyes, but I couldn't see your little hand down in the distance. So I'll stop.
Actually, you did see it. If anybody wants to jump in, please do jump in, because I'm aware that I may be speaking a lot. But I do have one point I want to respond to Neil with, and I'll just survey to see if anybody wants to speak first. Okay.
I just wanted to briefly say, yeah, I just really love that. As I heard you, almost the points of the diagram we looked at to come back to those basic questions from time to time, because that's what I felt we did yesterday in the conversation, and which worked so well because we came back to the basics. And yeah, I like that. Yeah, go ahead. Sam.
Forgive me, I didn't see yesterday's, so yeah.
Actually, Deborah had a contribution to make.
Yes, because Neil, when we talked, I showed Neil a picture like this. And I was saying, I've been drawing these obsessively. It's part of my story. But this is very much, and I don't know why I was drawing these. I mean, my notebooks are filled with these things where they go together, and these nodes are very, I know that they're very important. In this picture, there's a big fracture, and there's something horrible coming out of it, and the nodes are cracking, and that's really, I know it's a bad thing, because we need these nodes strong. And I know that these are like consciousness patterns, and they're looping. And I also have drawn things where you have these consciousness patterns, but you have these things that travel along them that destroy things. I don't know what these, I mean, it feeds into my narrative, but I think it's also what Neil's talking about and what we're doing as this group. We're trying to figure out how we come together, and maybe maybe like this session is critical because we do what humans do best, and we learn who we can identify, like who's good at what, and we know who to ask for when we are individually doing something either locally or on a bigger basis, who to ask for help. And maybe that's one of the biggest treasures, is that we have this space where we can get to know each other and form these nodes of collaboration, nodes of knowledge. But I think we can do more too. And we're feeling our way through that process. But anyway, Sam, you go.
Well, you gave me another thing to tie into my response. But let me first say what I think I wanted to say, because the questions that I think allow us these learning points can be very, very revealing, but people do this a number of different ways. So let me share with you 4 questions that I'm familiar with that actually are ways that, I and my teams have tried to learn. Obviously, there's one is, what has worked? What should we keep doing? What should we stop doing is an interesting one. What should we try next is the third. And what do we not yet understand, to me, is the most important question. Because if you ask those 4 questions, they allow you to take a new approach every single sprint or every single iteration or every single periodicity in which you actually try to do things. Some of you may recognize this comes from Agile, but they're actually, from a number of different sources. The last question, what do we not yet understand, allows us to move forward without analysis paralysis. It says, let's just put this on the backlog and let's consider it later. But the first 3, what should we keep doing? What should we start doing new? What should we stop doing? Allows us to learn. Okay? So to me, those are very, very important questions. And I think out of the last 20 years, those 4 questions have been very effective. The next one is, like it or not, I consider myself having raised a number of barns in the last 3 or 4 decades. And at the risk of bringing in some thinking that is, quote, from the industrial frame, there's still some very good practices that come out of having raised multiple barns. And one approach, and you can call it either user engineering, or you can call it systems engineering, or you can call it system design, or you can call it product management. But here it is, okay? Is that when you describe what it is you want to do, write a piece of science fiction. Write a narrative or a story or a day in the life of, as if what we wanted to do, what we wanted to be, what we wanted to create already existed. What would that world look like? And what would my life look like in that world? Contrast that with the world I live in today. Okay, so there's a clear gap that you can characterize, and then identify all the stakeholders who are involved, who makes decisions, who takes actions, who works with this, who are victims, who is affected but don't actually directly impact the product or system that we're actually trying to create. If you identify all the stakeholders and give them nouns, maybe some noun could be change maker, another noun could be politician, another noun could be spiritualist, another noun could be novelist, another noun could be student. Identify all of these different stakeholders. Once you've done that, the second step, and I'm not going to go and lecture ad infinitum, but the second step is, what do each of these stakeholders want to do? What are their use cases? Do they want to transact? Do they want to learn? Do they want to teach? Do they want to create? Do they want to connect? Do they actually want to love? Do they want to befriend? Do they want to travel? Do they want to write? All of these different use cases. And once you've prioritized these nouns, these stakeholder types, and then you've prioritized some use cases, then you've got a way to say, okay, how do we start? That's where I'm offering that as a framework for how we have some of these barn raising conversations. We haven't yet gotten quite there yet. I think we've, kind of hinted at that in multiple different past conversations, but it's one way I offer because I know that at least in projects that I've been involved with for 3 or 4 decades, it has been a useful way to approach this. It's not the only way, but it's a useful way. And let me stop there for now.
May I? I recognize a lot of what has been said, and I wonder by myself, why do I not simply agree to go forward with, for example, the procedures and the methods Sam proposes, or any other for that matter. And I don't know, but I notice that I'm trying to really deeply understand what is needed. And I'm very happy Doug is not here because he would have forbidden us to use the term industrial frame. But I very much like what you said. Thank God it's in the, thanks to Neil, it's in the chat. Those 4 points, what have we learned? What should we stop doing? What should we start doing new? And what do we not yet understand? I'm a lot of the time at point 4 because I sense there's something I'm still missing. I do not yet see what I do not see. Otherwise, I would have done what I always do. And I also have my design thinking and my experience. And I could bring in a method, and Neil could, and maybe I think we all can. So, and to me, it apparently answered a deep, unformulated question or desire in me. And so that's why I'm hesitant. And I totally understand what Neil says. It looks like nothing's. And there's a sense of urgency as well. So this combination is kind of rather painful. Because I know I want to find the answer, I do not have it yet. And there are so many answers, there's so much information. That's how it feels for me. And I would like to take the liberty to have you look at the sketches I'm making while thinking out loud. Would I? I have a camera that can go, okay, there you are, and I'm just trying to make sketches. And I started this morning with this little sketch you can see in the middle. That the we space, I think I have my space, you have yours, and I shouldn't move the camera too much. And there's an overlap. You can have it all if you want, Neil. There's an overlap, and I started kind of zooming out and adding more and more stuff. And I'm trying to kind of map it out and understand it, but it gets so complicated that I get lost. But what I'm trying to do is basically this thing. This is the way I think. I try, there are all the elements in the big picture. I'm sorry, the camera does not always do what I want to do. It was just... But I just map out all the elements and connect them. So that's the way I think. But the way our brains work, you make it a story. It's a procedural from one idea to another. So that's different. And this is very small. I just didn't mean to share it. And then I read a post by, a very good post by Ron Scroggin from the Conversational Experiments group. And he had a great story, a great post, really great message in it. And then I noticed that what it does, what does it evoke in me? Sorry, this is unprepared totally. So what it does evoke in me, I understand it because it was well written and it touches me and I want to take action. But thanks to the quality of his post, I understood this is the mental part, this is the emotional part, and this is the action part. And we're always trying to get there. But what I missed, and he pointed there, that there's a fourth quality, that is the insight, the awareness, the consciousness. Wow, what is this about? Not just acting in, oh, there's a certain program starts running. No, I need to be very conscious and be aware of what it is about. So that's what I'm doing, and I spent the rest of the day kind of trying to map out how it's constructed. I will not go into it. I just added the overlap of purposes here that's mentioned by Neil. And then I tried, looking at what we are trying to do having this in the virtual space. So I'm just here looking at the square space, my screen, and I'm trying to get from information to understanding. And there is always tensions, and I like the word attention because there's a relation there. There's tension that there's something that will be going wrong, and we want to do something about it. So that's the tension. There's something that needs to happen, and it could be, depending on how you see it, very urgent. It doesn't focus really, does it? Very urgent, or it could be just so behind my horizon of urgency threshold to action that I'm like a boiling frog. All this after my daytime. So that there's just a few of the thoughts I just would like to share here. So, and there's just these are the few small things I could grasp.
That's wonderful, Harry. Yeah, really good. The other element of what I think Ron was talking about, and it comes back to what Sam was saying before, is around the level of consciousness that you bring into the situation. And, you know, capability and maturity, worldview, they're the filters that you're looking through with whichever of those pairs of glasses you put on, Harry, or I put on, or others put on, right? And the consciousness comes from stepping back and being humble enough to recognize that this is the filters I'm wearing now, right? It's the self-awareness of how I'm being in this space and what I'm experiencing now, which is the emotional impact of whatever it is I've just read. Why does this make me feel like this? Why did I read it like that? Which is the critical element of communication. Recognizing yourself that you are potentially receiving what was projected or what was presented by another, then you can't be a responsive communicator, right? You're reacting, not responding. The responsiveness comes to responsibility, the responsibility to question myself in this moment as to how I am behaving and why I'm feeling like this. The challenge, and I think this is something that comes up well in these groups, the challenge that's being addressed by these groups to some extent is holding in this space long enough to see each other in the discomfort, right? And not running away from the discomfort. The question then is, with this cognitive dissonance that I'm personally feeling or the group is feeling, which was your artichoke diagram or whatever it was, the explosion of fire on your picture there, Harry, is how do we hold the crucible that potentially can reach a positive, lift those that are willing to a higher state and those that are unwilling to question, why don't I see that? Because they're watching the others in concert. And I think that's the power of these Zoom sessions, is that we can see each other's faces, we can see each other's eyes. And I know I didn't have a camera for the first too many sessions, Tammy, and I'm sorry about that. I've got one now. You can see the authenticity. You can see the attempt. You can see the person in whatever stage of fixedness or brokenness they are and how they're receiving, not just how they're transmitting. And you can't make the assumption of how they're transmitting unless you've tested, is that what you meant? Because that's your projection of what you think they're doing. And that's the honesty we have to bring to these sessions, because otherwise we can't challenge if we're not being authentic. You know, I don't like the way you're doing that, but you'll do it yourself. No, I don't. So if you can't reflect on what you're doing, it doesn't work. Thanks, Harry. Well done.
So when I hear you say that, Neil, are you saying then that in our conversation that we have the whole picture of the why, the larger context, weaved into our consciousness, our awareness, and our communication, and that must be a part of the continuous communication? That is that a good? Does that represent what you talk about?
That's a wonderful question, Glenn, if I can address that. This is the challenge that I had with the Facebook stream my last night when I saw what Peter Jones had posted. I love Peter. I've had multiple conversations with him offline and other places. And I'm talking about him now, and I realise that. But in terms of the bigger picture, if we're talking bigger picture, then if we can say global challenges collaboration is around addressing the biggest issues, tackling the planet right now, right, as the biggest picture, and we're set up under the framework of what we set out originally to do, which was to address the global challenges challenge. That's my understanding. If that starts, then we say, right, at that level, this is the context. Now, anything we do within that needs to be aware of that context. Because if that happens, then it doesn't matter what we're doing, it's all good. But if that is actually opposite or different to, or taking us the wrong direction from addressing that, then we have to have some mechanism for discerning that. The hard part is in those maybe. So it's either yes, it's supportive, no, it's definitely not, or maybe. And there's a lot of maybes. What are our criteria for prioritizing, as Sam was saying, which stakeholders involved in which processes with what objectives to do what, when, how, why? And I don't want to align with a group that's going the wrong direction from my perspective. That's not a challenge to you guys, but I don't align with any group if I realise they're going completely the wrong way. I will inject myself into there because change agents have to be in the uncomfortable positions with people that don't get it, not just with those that agree with them. Otherwise, nothing changes. And there's so many silos going, the wrong direction, and the massive forces against what we're trying to do here. So the overarching system ethics that need to underpin everything we do are the base of the pyramid or the outer circle. Within this context, we are operating at this level with these people to do this specific project. And that can be multiple projects simultaneously, but the core overarching ethics have to be agreed, which is the meta-constitutional stuff that I've talked about, Sam, in terms of what are the rules we have for agreeing on the rules we have. And if we can't even agree on how we're going to make the rules, then how can we agree on the rules? So what is a participative way of making rules based on common understandings of system problems? And if there's things that are going to take us backwards, why are we spending time and energy in those areas? Unless it's to say, we think you've got a fantastic skill, and if you can see the way of using that for our benefit or to do this bigger picture, we'd love to have you on board, but this is the way we operate. At the moment, we have no mechanism for screening. And it's not to say excluding people from, it's to say if we're trying to create a baby, there's things you don't want in the mix. And so how do we keep the pathologies out? How do we keep the good stuff in? How do we enable the evolutionary growth of? How do we keep the space safe and yet challenging enough to make people think differently? And how do we show this is what we've already done, this is the stage of development we're at, when we're all coming from different starting points? So yes, I agree with you. I think there's a really important point of co-defining that bigger picture first, agreeing on that, saying that's our base level. I don't know if that's in the description of the GCC group on Facebook or anything yet, I'm not sure. But to me, it would be, here's what we broadly agree. Here's what we are trying to achieve. These are the sorts of players we've got involved. These are the sorts of areas we're thinking of going in. If you've got any others, please put them to us. This is our process for deciding why this is an important area. And within those, here's the projects. And this project is headed up by such and such, but we like to touch base and connect that stuff together. So I can see a need for structure that I haven't seen in GCC yet, but I know there's been multiple attempts to bring bits of it to it. So thank you.
Could I just come with a suggestion briefly? Would love to hear your quick thoughts on that. And maybe Sam also has a lot to say about that. But when we agree upon projects, each person will have to agree fully in what we engage in. So could there be a model where the agreements happen between the people who do agree fully on that agreement, and that those are the projects around which we must organize our activities one way or another? And if someone doesn't agree with the rules of play, then they aren't part of that project. Could that be a model?
I'll just put one caveat on that, and this is where the rules for making the rules matter. And it touched on before, I think, when Sam said it, that if somebody thinks that the rules don't work, then there needs to be a mechanism for saying how the rules could be better. So it's around self-improvement and collective improvement. So it's not if you don't agree with the rules, get out, through the fear that people have with agreements. If the rules don't fit, I've got to go. Or if the rules don't fit, this is the process that I feel comfortable with because people have said, I can point out this process is not working for me. If you want me in the room, then this is the way that I think I could improve the rules for me to be here. But with that comes a responsibility to be aiming for the bigger picture. So, you know, not I'm going to subvert this now for my own personal profit and benefit, and therefore I can see this is going to prevent me because you've gone P2P and you're actually trying to share this in open source, and I can see a real opportunity to capitalize on this and turn this into a piece of software that's going to work for me. You know, that's the wrong level of consciousness. That's the wrong level of ethic. That is going to drag us down. That's a pathology. However, what are the mechanisms for saying no to somebody that brings that intent? And what are the mechanisms for inviting somebody that might look like they have intent that you can actually, through better conversation, identify, oh, so you didn't actually mean that. That's the way I read it. So you've got to have mechanisms for holding that loosely, but still being firm about what we're here for. And at the moment, you know, I still have this perennial discussion about what we're here for. Aaron and others stick their hands up and say, yep. And others go, don't believe in population problems, don't believe in, so optimism, pessimism. It's like, if we're going to work together, we have to have some common picture of what we're trying to address at whatever scale we do it. Thanks.
Harry?
Sam, Neil, I completely follow what you're saying. And I have two images in my mind. One, let's say this industrial frame with agreements and the best versions of it, and Agile is bringing a lot, and there's a lot of evolution in that, and we're getting better and better at it. And I think it's part of the solution, I honestly do. And another picture I can't yet get on top of that, and that it's about the same thing. This is about, I tend to call this swarm intelligence. Because ants do not know about the bridge they're building. They don't have a clue. They don't even have purpose, but the floating island or whatever they need to survive and get to where they want. So there is some kind of a group intelligence that is not knowable at the individual level. And I think we're also striving for something like that. So that's where I kind of think I'm not yet there to say, okay, now we have this agreement between all of us, and we have this new world order plan, and we can put it forward out in the world. That's not it, and we know it's not that. So that's just interjecting this. I learned a lot of English here.
Yeah, it's both and, Harry. The ants that form the bridge, I read this recently, have simple rules. If somebody's stepping on my back, stay still, right? I'm stepping on your back because you're bridging a gap. And they'll bridge bigger and bigger gaps until the gap becomes too large. So there's simple rules. Humans follow them. When you evacuate a stadium that's being fired or fired on, they found that putting a simple post in the center of an exit way actually increases the rate at which people will leave, because they're not just crushing into the same large space. They're actually taking turns to go through that gap. So we know how to intervene with simple existential risk, right? We run away, it's fight, flight, flee, you name it. So the question is, for those of us that have the design intelligence, to think at that next level of emergent behavior. So it's not to take away the swarm behavior, it's to say, how do we evolve swarm behavior, right? So if lowest common denominator is the ant, what are we as Homo sapiens sapiens? Right, and I'm not criticizing ants, because they do it very, very well, and they'll be here long after we've gone, because they've got the right simple rules. But we're the ones that are screwing it up with the wrong designs, and we have to take responsibility for it.
Yeah, let me not claim to be an expert in biomimicry, but if we look at the complexity of swarmable flocks or swarmable mounds of ants or whatever it is, one can characterize that, at least from the outside, fairly readily, right? We can characterize anthill creation, tunnel creation, flocking behavior, flight behavior, distance between wings, that sort of thing. And we could probably write that in some dozens or hundreds of pages. If we try to characterize human behavior, I don't think we can get that in dozens or hundreds of pages. So there's simple kinds of behavior where we could say, yes, we flock, we create families, we reproduce, we grow crops, we kill animals, we eat, we make fire. Yeah, we could characterize those. But this thing over here has, trillions of connections that give rise to a complexity that gives us the opportunity and the privilege of designing higher forms of behavior, not just the swarmable ones. And I don't want to be just purely operating on instinct to say, okay, here's how I pet my dog and here's how I get through my day, because there's much more that we can create for ourselves that are not yet to the point where we can actually evolve those swarmable behaviors. They're up to us to design consciously. And that's a responsibility and a privilege. So I go back to my question, what does community B do that's different than community A, and what do you want to call those things that they do? If you don't want to call them agreements, what do you want to call them?
Sam, that's what I'm trying to touch.
Yeah.
I think this option B has very smart end rules that are thought up on the higher level. That's what I think. I'm just guessing here.
Well, I'm agreeing with you, Harry. But I'm just trying to figure out what language do we want to use around that. Because, certain language seems to trigger others, so I'm trying to avoid that triggering. So what words do we want to use around that?
Protocols, practices.
Something about practices?
Protocols, practices.
Okay, good. I can go with those. We can go with protocols and practices. Even choices. I think, you've proposed choices or conscious choices as well, right?
There's another element here, if I can just bring this in, and this comes up too regularly, but it's totally expected to come up, and that is difficulties over words like level, as in different levels of consciousness, right, or different states of consciousness. But the worldviews and things operate like this as well. So using ants as the example, Harry, not every ant is the same. They have a hierarchy. They have a differentiation of function. There are workers, there are queens, there are drones, and so on. So even the simplest of those biomimicry examples we would use have naturally built-in hierarchies, diversified according to function. Right? Same with a group. You don't throw a kindergarten behind the wheel of a car and expect them to drive safely. Right? So we have to, and this is one of the things that when you look at consciousness or human development, there's an aperspectival madness that comes if you assume everybody's currently equal, right? They're not, because they're at different stages of capability, maturity, physical fitness, mental capacity, language understanding, you name it, right? If we don't differentiate according to those things, then we've got a problem.
I never suggested anything like that.
No, I'm just saying. The reason that's important is that is going to influence who can agree and who can't, because the level at which they're agreeing is different. I agree we're all in this together. Yes, I agree we're all in this together. I don't agree I want to go through that doorway, but there's a fire. I can't see the fire. There's no fire. You've got to get out of here. No, I don't want to go. So communication, coming back to Sam's point, is so critical. We need to have mechanisms for communicating at different levels of understanding, and we need to have mechanisms for how we adjust if we recognize that somebody is not receiving at the level it was intended, right? And so, you can't shout at somebody who doesn't want to hear you and expect them to act. Doesn't matter how loud I say the same thing, what's a different way to do it? So an overarching narrative, as Deborah and others are very good at doing, and Harry's very good at doing with his pictures, are brilliant. Aboriginal Australians, and I'm sure Indigenous Americans as well, Tammy, you'd know better than me, have common story, different levels of meaning, right? The story is the same words. The people that read or hear the story around the campfire are hearing the same words, but the kindergarten kid is getting the parable, like the Sunday school parable, and the theologian around the campfire is seeing the higher consciousness in it. And the beauty of that simple narrative is that it holds those levels of complexity. But to assume it's only simple throws the baby out with the bathwater, and to assume it's too complex misses the kindergarten kids that need to be educated. So if we're going to build agreements, we have to recognise we're starting with different levels of, whether we call it levels, consciousness, understanding, and so on, language skills. We're all white, sitting here in a room, having a conversation in English, right? Sorry, Sambo. Side of your face, mate. Yeah, but the point I'm making here is that if you don't recognise those differences, you're already starting behind the eight ball, because you're projecting your assumption of sameness. And so consciousness means recognising and celebrating the diversity, and the fact that there's a queen back in the hive, and I'm actually doing my bit of holding the bridge at the moment, even though those bastards keep stepping on my head, But if I get out of this point, I know what I've got to do next. I've got to go and find some food. But Jesus, bloody hard with these people walking my back, So what role am I playing at what time, in what system, for what purpose, and with what overarching ethic?
Yeah, there sure are differences, aren't there? I mean, there's no question. There's so many. I mean, we're all unique with unique skills, capabilities, position, and yet there are similarities. So what could be the best way then to illustrate the different functions of different people in a system, which could somehow respect all the people for their contribution in the position they are, without getting into the classical traps of these hierarchical descriptions, which have been problematic, like the green, yellow, teal, it has its problems. And that's maybe why people are skeptical of it. But there's no question we have different abilities, different talents, and in a well-functioning system, we're going to have different positions. So what could be a better way to illustrate those positions? And when I see Harry's drawings, I see that as a visual illustration of human beings in different situations and doing different kinds of tasks. And when I hear Deborah's idea of this grand narrative, that's also a part of telling the story. So I feel there's a lot coming together here.
Sam, do you want to say something? Because I have something I could link between Neil and Glenn.
Then let me go after you.
Okay.
I wanted to ask a series of questions, but let me go after you.
All right. The thing that we also need to throw into talking about levels of consciousness is unconsciousness, because unconsciousness, I think, in most human beings takes up most of the space of our existence, and most people end up living in very unconscious patterns, behaviors, brokenness, pathologies, and they get stuck there, and it goes back to what Neil was saying. Consciousness rises out of this sea of unconsciousness. You've heard me say that many times. I'm floating on my own self-created sea of unconsciousness. Consciousness rises as you're able to step back and say, how did I get into this situation? That's from an individual personal level. And you can slowly start to pull something out of that unconsciousness and raise it into the sphere of consciousness. Now, everyone also knows I love Jung, and Jung studied that his whole entire life. And he says there's very, very, very few people that are at the current moment in time consciously. Most people exist past echoes. And he has like a diagram that shows, the more and more people will go back, they're back in the Renaissance, they're back in the Middle Ages, they're back, there's even groups of people that are living in the Stone Age, existing here today. And we have to interact we are all still part of the human family, still part of the human tribe, but we're trying to blend these different levels of consciousness, and it's very, very tricky. One of the subgroups of the GCC has started to tackle different, specialization with badges. So, it's that the influencer, the orchestrator. I promoted, I advocated for the healer badge. But I think that might be a less scary way to start noticing. I think we notice people, and I think we pick up, especially in Zoom sessions, where people are in their ability to grapple with self and other and in group situations. And we can have systems. I think it's not that hard to create systems like Neil's saying and Harry and everyone's saying, where we can start to see where to best position that person and put them in the flow. Because I think ultimately we want flow. We want a collective flow. I have learned how to do it individually, but how do we do flow in a group, in a collective? That is an amazing thing if we can learn how to do that. And there's going to be fits and starts. It's not, because it's hard to do it. It's hard. It's incredibly easy once you figure out how to do it, but it's incredibly hard to get to that part where you can do it, and then to do it as a collective. So,
I like these questions because I'm about to ask some more questions. I want to get yourselves down to a little kind of a level of immediacy. Suppose we have each of us answers to these questions that have been posed here in this space. I would issue this as kind of a personal challenge to each of us in this room as well as watching this video. The question and the challenge goes as follows. What practices or protocols or choices do I want to make and embrace that in my view will help us reach a level of collaboration here? Forget agreements. What protocols, practices, and choices do I want to make and embrace that will help us reach a level of collaboration? Because that takes it to be a very personal question. I don't think there's any obligation, there's no liability, there's no commitment required in that question. There's just, what choices do you want to make? If we each have that set of thoughts, and if we could each bring that to the next barn raising, I think that would be an awesome way to continue the flow from this conversation to the next. I'm just offering that as a thought. Over.
So I'll jump in, and what I want to bring is myself, my ideas, and the practices and protocols that I'm co-designing with other people, including our ways of being here in Zoom and in the Discovery podcast series, for example. I think that if other people were to adopt choosing people that they're inspired by and doing a deep dive both ways, and then seeing where their work intersects, that gives visibility to people's work. It spreads the work around of discovering each other. I know that I'm modeling this practice, but it's not for me to do it all. I'm motivated to do it. I just really think that we need to spread the workload. And in fact, it's wonderful to have different people's points of entry into that person. I'm going to have my interests that are going to lead my curiosity and my questions, but other people's interests may fit better with a specific person, especially if they're choosing someone that they're inspired by. One of my points of tension that I also want to bring up, and this kind of points to some of what Harry's kind of grappling with, and this is in the area of we don't know what we don't know, which is that I have a deep sense that it's a new way of being in a radically different way. So co-constituting has been a really big challenge for me because I see the patriarchal overlay that comes from. And I'm not resonant with it. And so I would like to choose where I put my energy. And I don't want to, Harry has said to me, Tammy, tell me what you need. That is a challenge for me too. I would rather have a conversation directly with you on a regular basis, Harry, about how you can intersect with my work. But like, I'm so busy. Like yesterday I did 6 hours of recorded media and, uploading and replying to the 85 pings that I had in a 8-hour period. Like I'm at max. And so I'm not going to direct anyone. I'm just going to say that. And that's part of me modeling what I know is the new way of being within myself. And so that's been a point of tension between Neil and I as well, because he's put his hand up and said, tell me what to do. I'm not gonna, I just, that's the antithesis of how I bring myself here. And so I think it's up to each one of us to choose how we invest our time and attention, and that there is enough of us to be able to choose where we want to put our energy. And so I'm just with that point of tension, because it is still present, because Neil and I haven't made the time to clear the energy that has been between us in terms of that.
Can we do it now? I'm just kidding.
Well, I am, in fact, by bringing it in this way, in the best way that I know how to be respectful, authentic, and honest with this very specific part of how we co-constitute, how we come in, because it's relevant to that part of the conversation. So I have a sense of how to be differently in that. In this moment, I'm looking to articulate and embody that. And I don't know what it looks like, because it takes that emergent co-constitution that I sense is at the heart of this thing we're looking to define. And by its very isness, it can't necessarily be defined, because that kills the life of that emergent force. So I'm sitting there with you all, with questions and sensings and curiosity and my heart.
If I can respond. We don't differ that much, Tammy, but you are bringing, I believe, some baggage around the term co-constitution when you talk about it as a patriarchal overlay. Because Sam's starting question a moment ago, and comes back to a sense of how to be differently. I'm just going back to his question. What practices, protocols, choices do I want to make and embrace that, in my view, that will help us reach a level of collaboration, is the first step of what are the principles or ethics that I run my life by. And I started this session by talking about the authenticity of speaking about my whole self. In the absence of me understanding my personal ethics, how can I assume to write ethics on behalf of others? So the co-constitution to me is, how do I bring my ethics into alignment with your ethics in a way that's trust-worthy? Because if you can't trust me and I can't trust you, then we're not together. If part of that co-constitution says this is the mechanism for how we hold difference, then there's not an issue. I've said this for quite a long time, that as far as I'm concerned, it's not an energy between us. It's a frustration over the rate at which we need to be collectively addressing some of these issues. And that comes through because of different terminology or different assumptions built into the terms that have been used. So co-constitution to me is kinship. Co-constitution to me is, why do we hang together at whatever level we hang together? And if I can't trust you behind my back to do this or that, or to do what you've been asked to do, or to do what you're capable of, that's part of it. Secondly, do I make somebody that's capable do something against their will? Or do I enable them to say, no, I don't want to do that today? So what are the mechanisms for? Not necessarily, I'm not saying you do, I'm just using this as an example. I'm not setting the rules and making somebody step up to the mark because I've categorized them according to a level of consciousness or a task or a skill. Harry, you must do this because you're the drawer. Harry, we think you're the best drawer. Do you reckon that you could do something like this? Yes, that'd be fantastic. Great. So it's a mutual recognition of the skill and a buy-in to the process. That's co-constitution towards a task. To me, the co-constitution element at the big picture level is, are we here for the global challenges or are we here for building software? Is software a pathway to global challenges? You know, and if so, how does that nest within the bigger picture? But the principle is, what is it we can do together we can't do alone? What is it we're trying to do? And what are the mechanisms we will use for how we do what we can do together? That's co-constitution. Now you can formalize that, you can call it the founding fathers, or you can call it the founding mothers, or you can call it the founding humans. But unless we have something, then people can't be attracted to it or stay because they can't see there's some certainty to what we're doing. And if there's no mechanism to change it, then people will leave if it starts to drift in its scope, which is my sense of what, you know, that's where I come to every time I come to these things is, where are we at now and how different is that to what I thought I was here for originally? So I don't expect you to say, Neil, this is what you must do, and I've never asked you that. I've always asked, what am I here for? What are we here for? What are we doing? Yeah. So, you know, I'm not after instructions. I want to know, where am I spending my priority time and energy? And if you guys haven't agreed on what that is yet, then do I have a say in that? If I have a say in that, what's the mechanism for us agreeing on that? Because if we can't agree on that, then why am I here again? So it's a cyclic process of reflecting on, where is my skill, my capability, my understanding, not with ego, best spent to do what needs to be done in the context of a planet that's collapsing under our pressure and bad design choices. You know, and if I can see this moving, and this is wonderful to have this conversation because it gives me an opportunity to self-affirm and to see it's part of the building process. So this is improving my personal constitution here to be able to speak my truth to you as people holding this space with me. Thank you. But is that enough to make the differences that I believe are needed in the timeframes available so I could spend my time and energy? And so it's a challenge because I love you all dearly, except for Glenn. No, I'm kidding. But the the point I'm making is that there's other people I could be with. There's other kin I could choose. There's other people I could be agreeing with. There's other people I could be co-constituting with. I'm here because there's something that attracts me to this space because it is open enough to have these conversations. But at the same time, I'm frustrated that I don't see how I can best contribute yet. And despite my best efforts to contribute, continually have to keep going back to people that come in new who don't understand what we're here for. You know, maybe that's my role, to keep going back and saying, guys, I think this is what we're here for. But every time I do that, there's nobody who says, yes, Neil, this is what we're here for. There's, no, this is what we're here for. And, you know, that's great. But if you're doing all of that and I think you're doing that, then why am I here? So where do I spend my limited time on the planet? And that's the biggest question for me. Thanks, Tammy. I hope that makes sense. If there's unanswered questions, please tell me.
I just want to respond to the challenge from Sam and Neil, because I hear you both saying the same, that you want to see a declaration of what we want to do. So I feel that this is the best place for me to spend my time and attention. I'm convinced of that. So that's not an issue for me. And so my commitment is that I'm going to be part of these conversations, and I'm going to also commit to something that I've had on my mind, and I want to do this, and that is to write a brief summary of the conversations after each conversation based on what I remember, because that's actually what I found out is the easiest way of doing it, because right after the conversation I remember pretty well what we talked about. So that I want to commit to, and I will also suggest as an answer to your challenge, Neil, that we don't know what we're doing here at all, I will suggest that we have reached an agreement that software is a part of the solution. It's a new way of humans interacting with technology, with language, and that's why language and understanding language has been so central to our explorations, where we really go into what do the different words mean to us. And I also feel that the suggestions that you come with today, I want to do that. That's it. I feel that's the next natural path to steer the conversations more specifically to the real primary issues, the why we're here, and add to this specific commitments from each of us, which we choose ourselves, just like Sam said. So I choose what I commit to. And just like Michael Josefowicz said beautifully in his talk with Tammy, that yeah, sometimes you don't deliver on it, okay, but then you learn and you try to continue improving. And that's a process. I mean, sometimes we're not going to do it perfect, but that's something to commit to. And if as long as we're having these conversations and we're keeping it real, coming back to the questions, really addressing it, asking whatever needs to be asked, then I think great progress is being made. And if we can then document that and have summaries and have drawings and use this as an occasion to study ourselves and study and see ourselves from the outside, there's immense learning that can be gathered. And so if I can be fully present here with people like you, I'm convinced it is the #1 best place for me to be and spend my attention and do something valuable. But it's, again, it's about presence and being and really being here and remembering the bigger picture all the way.
I also think the conversation, like especially Tammy and Neil, when we have points of intersection and differences, these are tremendous opportunities to harvest something. There's something really, really, really important between both of the perspectives. And I think all of us in this space, that's here in this space right now, have the responsibility to try to see what that is. And we should all be reflecting on both what Tammy's saying, what Neil's saying, what Sam's saying here, all of us, and we, especially between Neil and Tammy, because there are some very specific differences. But I also think, like Harry's picture, showing the circle, there are overlaps. And I think all of us are portals of transformation. We are always continually taking in information through multiple medias, and based on our level of consciousness or even unconsciousness, we can transform our experiences into sense and meaning for everyone and others. And I think that's the jewel we can harvest. And conflict, although it's very, very, very uncomfortable, probably gives us the opportunity to harvest the greatest jewels of understanding and moving forward. So I think we have a tremendous opportunity, and I think it is okay to sit on tension and conflict with I think here's a commitment I can make. My commitment is when I encounter moments of conflict and discourse, I want to dive deeper to figure out what's inside of me that I need to bring up so that I can see that I can hold more consciousness, and then I can bring more to either my workplace or the collaborative or my family, whatever space it is I have to operate in, the biggest moments of learning have been points of conflict for me every single time. That's when I've brought up the jewels of understanding, and that's when I've been able to transform individually. And then when I'm able to transform individually, I can go into a group with more of me.
Love that, Deb. So what are the conflicts you see?
Can I suggest a
Because I
different?
can't. I'm trying to work out where the conflict is. I'm honestly saying, where is the conflict? No,
I don't think that there's necessarily a conflict. It could just be perception. I think it's as easy as your word. Well, you said co-constitution. I think it could be as easy as words. Sam?
I think agreement yesterday raised some reaction in people. Conflict has the potential to do that as well. I think disagreement is a lesser form of conflict, which doesn't necessarily carry a lot of the emotive weight, emotive energy. So can we talk about disagreement and deal with some disagreements in a way that does not necessarily imply that there's high emotions?
I'll just make the observation that if we're dealing with disagreements, then we are co-constituting, right? Because we're actually reaching agreement. So the question is, where are the disagreements? Again, same question.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm looking to just express from where I am that I do feel tension. That's real for me, and it's been long time, right? And it's kind of it's in feeling pushed to demonstrate a kind of leadership that I don't believe in. And so I'm working within my own sense of what feels right in terms of how specifically you and I communicate, Neil, because it's been challenging for me. You've been kind of pushing me to define something in a bunch of different ways. Well, you have from the very, very beginning, directly, specifically to me, as well as more loosely within the comments on the Facebook page.
Can I clarify that and just say, I hear what you're saying, but you're taking that as me pushing you. I'm asking, what are we here for? Which is, I believe, the core of co-constitution around GCC. So I'm just saying, is that the way you're taking what I'm saying, which is about the bigger picture, as a personal challenge and therefore responsibility? Because I've heard you say this 3 or 4 times now in different sessions. You can choose to take what I say as pushing you to something, or you can choose to say, yes, that's a valid point in the case of the bigger picture. The resistance, might I suggest, would be if there's a difference between what you think we're here for and what I think we're here for. All I'm asking is, what are we here for? And when I ask that question, that's a challenge to those who think we already know what we're here for. So what are we here for?
And that's just the perfect setup, right? Like I was midstream trying to express something and I got interrupted, and now you have a question for me, which is at the heart of what I think we need to figure out together. I'm not the one to make the decision, even though I've been one of the people here from the beginning. And so I do wear that tension very uncomfortably, because it's not the way that I want to be. And yet I'm pushed by the need of the group, and part of what I'm doing is I'm holding this space. I'm holding that tension, that dynamic tension of the feminine, in an archetypal way, which means I can feel everything, right? Whenever the signals come across, I'm feeling all that and wanting to make things specific in what is burning at the will of my soul level. But I also recognize that the power that I carry based on the hours that I've spent in relationship with this project means that there's a weight to what I bring. And I'm doing my best to lighten that weight by creating spaces for people to come with what they have. So when I'm asked, what is the purpose of this place? I recognize that I hold more weight than others. And I'm trying to counterbalance that. And it's my own discomfort with that power dynamic that is in that feels wrong to me. You know, it doesn't feel like what we're trying to create. So I'm just kind of scrubbing from the inside, trying to understand from the inside how to be different in terms of power. And I feel like I got my fingernails on the cliff because I'm also the space at the same time. So I'm just explaining some of my tensions from a felt place. Sam.
I was wondering, Tammy, might you grant us the belief that each of us could potentially see you as an equal rather than as
Of course,
leader?
of course, of
And
course.
no. And the implication being that therefore you can actually authentically answer these questions without feeling that we will take it with too much weight. That's the question. Can you just enter that question and just give it your all as a member of this community without feeling such a weight of being the leader? And
I think
trust
I
that
am.
each of us can take it that way.
I think I am, Sam.
Good.
I mean, I
Then,
bring.
then I don't think you need to feel that weight. Is what I'm asking. Is can you relieve yourself of this weight?
Yes, she can, but we need to help her. That's what she's saying, and she is absolutely right. She has been here from the beginning. She has definitely gained gravity, and I think you are rightly calling us to action, and if we want to be here, we should respond, and we should offer where we can take off that weight. And I think we all need to become centers of gravity, and then we need to connect that from our points of expertise and from what we consider we do best. What are, we call it superpowers, we call it skills, we call it strengths, we call it levels of consciousness. It doesn't really matter what the label is, but we figure out what we do best. And I think maybe it's on us to figure out how we connect if we choose to connect. But we need to take the weight off of you. You are one of the centers of gravity. I know that there's others. I am completely ignorant as to how the GCC really formed. But it's growing, and there's growing pains. So now we have to figure that out. But yes, she has a lot of weight, but we can help her.
And you are a leader, Tammy. I mean, you are a real source of inspiration. You create all this energy, and you hold this space, and it creates so much engagement. So that's great. It's a lot that's happening, and others can be leaders too. We could all be leaders in our different ways. So the question comes to me is here: what is this we? Are we here for? Because we're each here human beings, and we want a better world. And we and we've been doing things together, and we've been doing things by ourselves. And there's an energy here. There's things happening. So this is great. But like, is the issue really, Tammy, that maybe it's a bit overwhelming, all these questions, all the information overload? Because I feel that too, even though I don't have any big following or anything, but there's always so much that I would like to respond to, and I would like to engage in, that I really have time and attention for, and it's overwhelming. Does that have something to do with this too? I just felt that was relevant here.
Well, I think that it's the I see that it's all perfect, right? You know, Neil's questions are perfect. It's we do be able to answer them, right? And what's required is to do the work that we are doing. So it's it is an emergent process, literally. And in terms of like for me, there's this sense and feeling that I have, that I trust, that is difficult to put into words, but it is about sensing the whole and being in that. And I think that that's part of it's the same facility that we all have when we look at the state of the world today, and however way that impacts us, and realizing that we're on this cliff edge. There's an anxiety and anxiousness and sensing into not there yet, right? And so in terms of what Deborah was talking about spreading the load, I think that is happening. So excited to hear that you're stoked to do a little write-up of the session. Like, that's what's needed to make those concise pieces that maybe Harry can do a diagram for, that are collecting these artifacts that can signal more quickly rather than watching a 3-hour video. And that is what we're building. So we're in fact identifying what we need to build. That's the what that we've been talking about all along, which is how, you know, what are the functional ways as humans and as ways of signal each other and machines, technology, that can connect us as a strong web of people that are holding knowledge of how to make that transition, because it's about connecting together. So, you know, Neil has high level practices in terms of group governance. And while it may seem obvious that that's the first step, it's part of the full coming together of what is. So, you know, this process that I've been promoting and that we've adopted in recording our process, so that we can learn how to and reflect on and capture the real. It's just really about capturing what it is that's actually happening, so that we can learn from that. You know, these are all things that we are doing, but it is a mess. It's like full complexity exploded between, there's only 6 of us here and a dog, right? And that's only 6. And there's such an explosion of what we could understand from each other. And it, you know, my question is, how do we do that? How do we stick around long enough? How do we listen long enough? How do we love each other? How do we invite each other into our in terms of, you know, what do we need? What do we have? These are still things that we are discovering about each other. And we need to know that to be able to, as we co-constitute, as we are this greater weaving of sovereign individuals, opting in to lean in to transition, to transform. I don't know. That's what I got right now.
Tammy, I'll add to that. In systems, I think this again links up. This is my own personal crisis I'm going through. I think when human beings come together, we have to also factor in psychic forces, the psychic tensions that happen. And I think often, like in my work, this is symbolizing my work situation. you can have destructive forces that suck down. I think in Neil's resilience web, he also had depressions in the landscape. It's like a psychic landscape of where people can get stuck in knowledge, wells of knowledge. But that I would say is a more productive well to get stuck in, instead of one that gets sucked down into self-destructive behaviors. But I think it comes back to gravity. We are not victims to these forces. And what I have here is I have me circling around this vortex that's trying to suck me in, and I'm realizing I have my own power of gravity, and I can maintain my spiral outside of the vortex and not get sucked down. And the superpower that is helping me maintain that is love, empathy, compassion, and intuition. And I think if we learn how to bring our better selves into our collaborative spaces, when these forces, and we have to get good at recognizing when these psychic forces that we are humans. So we all have these forces and playing on us all the time. And so we have to learn to recognize when these forces maybe become pathological or create these deep wells, or even maybe they explode into volcanoes, or maybe, I don't know. We would like to have a landscape that we can progress over collectively and know the peaks and valleys, and anticipate and guide others across maybe. So as well as the technology and the systems, we got to think of the psychology, and how to recognize and help each other to maintain our centers of gravity and to share the gravity then.
I know you want to talk, Neil, but I just want to drop this down. If I just want to switch the energy for myself, drop this piece down, which is I have a superpower, which is seeing what I call soul contracts. So if you imagine there's like a packet of information, I see it as if it's like very fine filaments of light. These are like psychic impressions of some facility. And so as a web, these filaments of light that basically can cover the universe, but are folded and folded and folded and folded and folded into a packet. And in my deep considerations, because I have spent a fair amount of time praying and trying to understand what's between us, what I've seen is this little soul packet, what I call a soul packet. And when I look in there, I see that there's a wounding that we share, that is a wounding that's at planetary scale. It's as systems thinkers. And that in presence with you, because I have the same wound, I can feel that wound, and it's uncomfortable for me. It's deeply, deeply uncomfortable. But it's not you. It's a resonant force of something that we're both wounded by. This is my psychic impressions. And so for me, it's this deeper thing that's happening at a soul level that isn't to do with you or anything that's happened between us, but as a deeper level of healing that I'm sensing. And so I just wanted to put that in there because it's not personal. It's something, but it's deep. So I just wanted to share that from that place.
Thank you, Tammy. That's the best you've said, right? To date, it's been personal. There's a tension between us. This is universal suffering, right? This is comprehensive compassion. We are the walking wounded. We are the ones that are showing up, trying to make, dare I say it, a fucking difference on a planet, going to hell in a handbasket, right? In the absence of us, this place is screwed and we know it, but there are many other us's out there doing the same thing. The tension between us is how can we rapidly replicate or scale up? And we can't bring others along if there's a different group each time and if we're different stages and we haven't got to that universal suffering. The universal suffering requires systems understanding of the complexity and the comprehensiveness of the systemic challenges and collapsing ecosystems that we have. And if we're pretending, as unfortunately a lot of the energy does go, and this is not to diminish from that, if we're pretending that technology will save us, we've lost the game, right? So part of the tension in me is when I see things which aren't going to work, right, or aren't going to be good enough, how long do I let those players play with that if their energy could be directed towards something else? And when do I stop asking them to redirect their own energies, not make them, ask them? Have you seen there's a train coming, get off the train track, right? Challenge I have everywhere I go. You haven't seen me in full flight in a group synthesizing 35 people and getting wow moments. I haven't seen you in your meetings doing the same thing. So we're coming together here as mutually hurt, commonly understanding individuals. To direct that then personally is natural because we're sitting in a situation where we're seeing each other's faces, but we're actually talking about the greater whole. My sense of who you are is as an evolutionary doula. You're holding the space safe for what wants to be born. You're being careful not to interfere with the baby. You're being careful not to interfere with the mother. You're being careful not to interfere with the midwife. They all have roles, but we haven't defined exactly what those are yet. Outside, we've got a whole bunch of people who want to come in, and you're at the interface. So you're one of those concentric circles. You feel a responsibility, but if you're ascribing that to me making you say what wants to be born and saying, no, why are we here? Oh, I'm keeping the space safe for something to be born. Great. What wants to be born? When I ask that question, it's of the group. But if we're going to birth something that isn't going to be evolutionarily adapted for the changing conditions we know are coming, then we're not being conscious. We're just being ants. So, oh, flood, better form into a ball. Great, Oh, bridge, better build a bridge, So we can see this stuff coming. We know it's coming. We feel it in our hearts. We feel it in our souls. I love your soul package idea. The difficulty I have is that because we're operating across multiple levels of capability, maturity, consciousness, disciplinary difference, levels of understanding in the group, that we need some structure to allow people to self-differentiate and to step up where they are responsibly able, not where they think they should be taking us. And that's why I've been throwing these structures in there, is to challenge people to think differently, to lift themselves out of wherever they might be at. Not with the arrogant assumption that I'm ahead, but having known this is country that I've traversed, this is what I saw. The conversation I had with Deborah the other day was really quite informative because we went through several cycles, in my opinion, Deb, of descent into grief, personal tragedy, what's happening around us, all those sort of things, but also then into, oh wow, here's some insights. The insights come if you can hold the space long enough. So I agree with that principle. The CDE model that Glenda A. Yang talks about is, container difference exchange. If the container's too big, the differences are too small, and the exchanges, difference is too great, and the exchange is not constrained in any way, there's no reaction. If the differences are too small, then you only get the same things. So you need a container of the right size with the right amount of difference and the right level of exchanges. We're developing, I believe, elements of bits of that, but we don't have a huge amount of diversity here yet. We've got differences of opinion and differences of technology and differences of understanding and technical expertise. That bigger circle, what are the mechanisms for inviting in or excluding out once we've decided what we're going to do? So when I ask those questions, I'm not personally challenging you, Tammy. It's you're feeling that responsibility because you are the one holding that space. And, leadership is not taken. Leadership is given. We've given you that leadership because you are the one that created this space for us. Thank you.
And I would note that is shared. Like, I thank you for that, but it is shared, and I recognize that.
I actually think all of what you say there, I agree with totally. But I would love to hear more, Neil, about what would be your idea for what is needed. It sounds a little like you're saying that more action is needed, and I'd love to hear a little more about how would you see it working, let's say if we're not yet working as well as we could, in the possible future where we did find useful roles and work as a group, like what would that look like?
Thanks, Glenn. Well, it's a tricky one because it depends on who's in the room. But ultimately, unless we have communities that can exist in their environments, it doesn't matter how well our technology works. And so a lot of the stuff that I'm playing with heal communities that know they're failing, and in identifying how do we design physical communities that might work. Within those communities, that's going to be in the context of the environment. So what are the biophysical situation now, and what's that likely to be in 10, 15, 20, 50 years' time? So if anything we're doing now doesn't assist doing that, then why are we doing it? Why are we building more roads? Why are we building more of this? Why are we doing more of that? So there's a whole bunch of divestment elements of things we shouldn't be doing that require urgent attention. When you look at those divestment elements, you then ask, so are any of these efforts we're making contributing to the rate at which we divest, or are we just increasing the rate of investment? So this is where economy and those discussions come in to the things around GCC. So if we're talking about closed or cyclic economies or circular economies, great idea. But if you're bringing the wrong world principles or understanding of complexity, then you've got assumptions built into the model which will fail. Those that can see those biological failures have issues with those that can't see those. So one of the biggest challenges here is, where is the ecological literacy? And does the ecological literacy underpin the technological direction? What are the checks and balances we put on how we do these things? And how do we reach agreement on that? The biggest challenge I have in multiple groups is the inability to see constraints to growth and limits to growth based on not just current situation, but failing systems that are invisible, the blind spots, to people that are optimistic about techno-utopian futures. That's not picking on this group. It's individuals. But in the absence of a mechanism for screening that sort of discourse from productive design discourse, then you end up dragging people back into conversations and arguments rather than into co-design of future possibles. And if I can see multiple future possibles that are impossible, this was a conversation in another thread the other day, if I can see future conversations that are future directions that are impossible, how do we decide? So the triple loop learning, talking about what are we learning? First of all, are we doing things right? So assuming we know what we're doing, are we doing it right? Secondly, are we doing the right things is a deeper level of question. Third question, how do we decide the right? So where's the mechanism for deciding the right things for GCC to be devoting energy to, right? That doesn't take away anybody's personal autonomy, a piece of software or whatever, shows how it contributes to the whole, right? But the whole has to be defined. This is our intention. So to me, whether it's micro projects, as Rama and others have been playing with, and Peter Jones has been playing with in Africa, and Michael Josefowicz, right? If it's micro projects, great. But let's not assume that's enough. That's one piece of the puzzle, right? If it's macro, whole of globe internet connection and different platforms like John Keldon and others are playing with, great. If that's in an ethic that's actually going to sustain the planet. So to me, the global systems ethics that we need to define here are the critical element. Within that, we can agree on how we do projects. But unless we've got the global system ethics and understandings correct, it doesn't matter what we do. It's going to miss the game. So the difficulty you've got here is you can't make people redirect. We shouldn't be redirecting them. We should be allowing them to reach their own level of consciousness, whether it be ecological consciousness, whether that be technological consciousness, whether that be how we work with people consciousness. For those of us that can move further, faster, how do we group together? What do we do on behalf of those that can't? How do we communicate that to those that can't? And how do we also be humble to the fact that there might be others that are further ahead than us that we can't see or accept yet? And it's the humility of not knowing that makes us aware of that daily. So it's not an arrogant, ego-based assumption. It's a mutually defined recognition commonly affirmed by people I know and the groups I go into that I'm doing something at a level higher than they are currently doing, and therefore I'm of some value. If what I'm bringing to this group is not of value, why would I spend my time here? Because others get what I'm doing. So I'm trying to find my level to operate, because we can improve efficiency at level and do the wrong things righter till the cows come home. No cows, right? So the question is, how do we lift the level of the game? And that's hard if you haven't set safeties which show where you've been to. And so these conversations are wonderful, and I'm glad we've got to this point. Exactly what should we do? I don't know. But exactly what should we agree not to do is critical. What should we not be doing, right? And direction is defined by, recognizing those places we shouldn't be going because they're too dangerous, or we've already been there and it's pretty well explored and we know it's not working. And then there's a maybe zone of, this is a dangerous area, let's go into this. Maybe that's your unblocking sessions. This is a dangerous area, we're going to go and play in this area and see what happens. But we're aware this could go either way, but it's not black or white. We're in a very massive spectrum, but ultimately somebody somewhere has to decide that we're doing this for global planetary survival, not for technological improvement for a software system for benefit to a small group. I hope that's of use.
Yes, and is there any person in the room here that does not agree with that? We're doing this for the whole world. I mean, for me it's obvious.
I'm going to invite the question, however, if that's the case. I'm going to invite the question that if we're all in the same boat, rather than going towards the bow of the boat or the stern of the boat, we're all in the same boat, right? So what does it really mean to say, leave this community and find a different community? We're all in the same boat. That's question number one. I'll just ask one more question, and that is, we've all in this group, I think, seen the dangers of what we've been calling the industrial or the patriarchal or the hierarchical frame, et cetera, et cetera. What I'm wondering, though, is, so that rather than prescribing solutions that we think we want to impose on the world or on this community, what's the thing that we want to share? To me, the thing we want to share is, in a weak sense, a vision. And I call that weak because visions are motherhood and apple pie. They're very easy to sign up to. They're not very actionable. What I want to at least double click on and get to a lower level of detail is what I'm calling models or simulations or predictions based on what we know and what we see. Now, on that one, I think if we can educate ourselves first and then share them with others, and then find points where we're actually possibly deficient in some way and improve our own understanding of those and start sharing those even more widely, those allow everyone else to make their own conscious choice about what to do and how to act and how to be. I think that's where society and the media and the infrastructure right now is very, very weak. We used to have something called the press that would report what was going on. And that was even a very weak form of informing the public. But science, in fact, has gotten this huge backlash. There's anti-intellectualism like I could not ever believe. If we can actually repair that and start figuring out what do we actually want to base our knowledge, our beliefs, our projections, our simulations, our extrapolations on, then we can have some kind of a common discourse. If there's a very strong anti-intellectualist bias anywhere, here or elsewhere, I don't know where to go, because that will basically cripple us. Those are my two possibly closing statements, because I know we're coming up on about 3 hours or so now. Over.
If I can just try and answer that if I could, because Sam, you've just described my bridge of boats model. We're not in the same boat. We're in the same boat as humanity, but the wicked problems are caused by social complexity times fragmentation. And you just described all the elements of that model. each of us is trying to find kinship with people that get enough of what we do to actually feel like we're being affirmed. And so the political divides and intellectual divides and the consciousness divides are all defined as multiple levels, as well as also separate across a plane. So we're not in the same boat, depending on how you define the boat. Nested system, which is why that diagram we started with at the beginning is the ellipses in concentric ellipses. You know, in a nested system, all of those things are interacting simultaneously. And so we're on the same globe. We're in different continents. We're in different religions. We're in different understandings. We're in different levels of consciousness. We're with different technologies, different disciplines. So that's, again, part of the starting diversity and difference. Should we all be in the same boat? Should we all be going the same direction? No. Should we have multiple boats depending on the level of comfort with that boat, and have other boats available to choose from if I want to step across the gunnels to a safer boat or a faster boat or a boat that I believe that I could get on with and go further with? Yes. What are the mechanisms for trust? How do I trust the seaworthiness of that vessel based on my understanding of the conditions? Some are going to stay anchored to the current shore of the current paradigm for a long, long time, but eventually people are going to have to move. Others are going to be out there exploring, going further, faster. When you see a trustworthy crew, how do you judge them as trustworthy? Are they all bloody pirates, or they look like they're strong? They look like they know what they're talking about? What are the engagement mechanisms across difference? And how do we bring that forward? So you've nailed it in. We're in the same global boat, but we're in multiple small boats. Some of us don't even want to get into a boat. Some of us don't think we have to go anywhere. But the bridges that we can build are based on what boats do we recognize, which is your map of players. What are the processes that we can facilitate the emergence with? Because when emergence happens, we're facilitating emergence by accelerating the rate and redirecting its intelligence and its collective energy. And if we can't do that, then we won't be able to get across this huge gulf between current paradigm and future paradigm. So to me, the bridge is, you know, transformative practices, right? The rungs on the bridge, those elements of, like the sleepers, you know, being ethics, principles, institutions, policies, not to desert the old, but to recognize we're in transition from the old towards the new. The languages we need will ultimately be new, but if we start with a new language, nobody understands us. And so we have to show how we've got from where we need to be going. And you're right, we can't see the horizon, we can't see the vision. We can see we can't stay here. So I can put that diagram up at some point. I know it's not the right time to share because some people don't like having their vision of the others impaired, but I could have talked to that diagram. I'm happy to post that. I don't know where to post it to actually get anybody to look at it. So it's an example of about 10 years ago thinking, but it's still very valid, I think, to hear. I've posted it before, but it's exactly all the elements you just spoke about. And it honours the individual autonomy, the individual difference, but also the human need to come together collectively, depending on who I feel comfortable with. And the critical element is, how do I connect with others that aren't currently in my group?
I just feel I have to respond now to Sam and Neil, and because I feel that what is the GCC, and somehow is this related to this anti-intellectualism, which suddenly struck me. The GCC is an idea. It's an abstraction. The reality is that we are human beings in different parts of the world who are now existing. Now we're seeing each other's faces. Now we're exchanging information. And some of us have been meeting regularly and have conversations. And that is a transformative practice. And it's been a transformative practice. And it's developing in surprising directions. It's taking its own form, and we're figuring it out as we're going along. And the questions you've been asking today has influenced the direction of the process. And it's a process of people. So we're real people. So it's then the question, what is the team of people I want to work with, and what kind of work would I want to do, and having a relationship where we can figure it out along the way. So there's the people, and we have projects, and we can commit to projects, and we can change the commitments. So the GCC then is an abstraction we use, which is relatively useful, and we have the scheduled meetings, and we have a certain structure, and that is helpful, but it's only a part of it, and it can happen in many other channels, and we're members of other groups. And there's the GSS and the Ecology of System Thinking and the United Earth, and there's all kinds of other groups with people working on the same dream of a better world for everyone, which is ecologically sustainable, and where the technological utopia is integrated into an actual ecological consciousness, which takes everyone into account and makes sure every single person in the world is happy, relatively as happy as can be, in ecological sustainable harmony with all life forms. And that's a big dream, but it's actually possibly the only thing that we can realistically aim for. And that's maybe the strange thing about the situation. So there are these big possibilities, but yeah, it obviously demands a totally new mindset. So yeah, we need to evolve consciousness. Seems clear. And yeah.
So at the risk of being a bad moderator and recognizing that we've been going for about 3 hours plus, I was wondering if we might each for 1 or 2 minutes perhaps revisit the why and see whether that's altered in any way, the what as well. And specifically then perhaps I would ask that question: what are the principles or protocols or practices that you believe would take us in a forward direction, and might you take that on to bring that to the next conversation? Now, feel free to close with whatever you like. That's just one possible way of inviting some closing statements. Over.
I'm going to jump in. My why is because we can come together to shift global paradigms. What I bring is my heart, my mind, and a belief in us and myself. And I bring some practices. I think that through documenting our process, we can take a shorter amount of time in our iterations and stubbing our toes, especially if we review them and learn from what we've been up to. And there's the Manhattan Project, what we've called the Manhattan Project, which is a lot of different people coming together to create something that is massive and comprehensive and can take all of the knowledge and wisdom of the assembled people and weave it into a superstructure of awesome. So, yeah, I believe that we can do that with enough intention, respect, attention, and commitment. Over. Oh yeah, and love. A lot of like a bigger love than you can do just with your two hands.
All right, you added it because I love the Manhattan Project metaphor, although it has the old, hierarchical governmental industrial frame of it. But rather than the Manhattan Project, I was going to say, let's just collect some people to create not the atomic bomb, but the love bomb. Okay. I mean, I've said too much already, but I really want to invite some practices that I've outlined elsewhere, probably multiple times. I seek to connect with others who want to use those practices and learn from those practices. I want to resonate with others and support them loosely at first, and then perhaps over time tighter. And then I want to, in this way, invite some discussion around agreements, practices, structures, models, and then eventually how we put those into practice and how we scale them. And the scalability, I think, implies the technology, but not until, okay? So that we can come up with the challenge that pulled us together in the first place, which was a global governance model. I still think that's where the initial primary attractor for this group originated, and that's still where I'm focused. And that's my offering for now. Over.
You've heard too much from me.
I can answer briefly. Why I'm here is because I believe that humanity can manage to live in harmony together, and that's the only realistic option that's worth aiming for. And I want to spend my whole life doing everything I can to make that happen. And I'm here because I've met other amazing human beings with amazing talents and gifts and genius out of this world. Every single person in this room who want the same and are saying exactly the same thing in different ways. And that's why I think it can happen. So that's why I'm here. And I'm going to bring all my ideas and try to bring them the best ones, most relevant ones, and work on them openly and try to make them so good that they can be practically beneficial for all of us and for the whole process and for the general situation. And be open to learn and change the approach whenever it's needed, obviously. I think I can bring, and I think we all can bring some amazing ideas. And just, I totally agree with Tammy that what is coming here is something so comprehensive, so awesome, so great that we've never seen it before. Yeah. Here's another friend. Yeah, so I think there's something so great which can grow between us, and we're seeing the shape of it emerging, and I feel that we're on the right track. So, and thanks to every one of you for being here.
Harry, do you want to go or should I jump in? I am at such a crossroads. I even asked the question, my question is, what am I doing here in the most esoteric way? Like, why do I have a body and why am I on this earth? And I have created certain situations in my life that are very painful right now. And I've done it out of my own unconsciousness. The story I've been writing has been helping me discover certain truths about myself, that they go even deeper. What I've been seeing is they go deeper than just me. They go into a well, a collective well. So I feel like what I'm bringing is I'm doing deep dives. I'm doing deep, deep soul dives, and I'm trying to bring up something. And I know I need to share it. I need to find ways to share it. So whatever I can bring up in my own struggle and share with the group, and that there's synergy and it can help lift us, that's what I'm here to do.
Thank you. At the moment I've been deeply touched with, in this conversation, and I think that there's a truth behind. I'm not just here just for myself, but for this universal wound, is it called? And I think Deborah beautiful addressed that as well. And I'm constantly trying to kind of also grasp myself together without being lost in the enormous complexity of it. And I try to come back and try to kind of capture snippets of it on a humanly comprehensible scale. So it's all about humans. That's why I'm always trying to get it back to me, myself, and I, because this is the only tool I have to work with. So that's why I'm also trying to make those very simple pictures with small figures in it, because people can relate to that, because most of us here are humans. There are a lot of dogs in the room these days as well. But that's, and I'm doing it either by, it's not even choice, but I go to bed with it and I dream about it and I arise with it. With the question, what does it look like and how can I explain what I see in a way that people are less informed and less less busy with it, also get a chance to get online and aligned and to kind of see what we are about. That's what I'm doing. Thank you.
Thanks, all. I guess, when you all speak and I'm listening to what is possible, as Neil indicated, I was trying to experiment myself with positioning myself outside the group and observing, okay? Not just outside the group, but 5 years or 10 years down the road, assuming that something remains that's worth looking at in 10 years from what we have. So if I look at that from a collabo-archaeological standpoint, I would ask the question, what is this group doing? What is it creating? What is it trying to be? How is it trying to pull together in some ways? And it's those things that give me questions that would then drive perhaps the next conversation, hopefully next Saturday. But those are what passed through my mind is, from some standpoint of someone looking at this group, either as individuals or as a group, what would they be thinking about this interaction, whether we're actually making forward progress, what is being clarified, what is still remaining to be understood, and what would be the next steps that would move us forward. And so I invite some of that consideration by all of you in preparation for next Saturday's conversation as well.
Sam, I love that. I think that should be an exercise for all of us. We should all pretend we're pick a point in time in the future and look back at what we're trying to do now. And I think you said it before, imagine greater, just write fiction. I've been doing that. I've been writing fiction and it's breaking through into reality more often than I can even record now anymore. So I think we can write our future, but we do have to go in, we have to see into the future, look back and figure out how we can go farther, faster, and higher. I think we have to fly so we see the landscape. And so I think all of us could imagine that maybe that's our job, to imagine that over the next week and come back with our visions. I don't know. It might not be fast enough for Neil.
Your story is more true now than it was a week ago because you've met the characters in it. And this is the point, that we are the ones that are writing the story. We are the ones that are being the story. If we can't imagine something better, then what are we here for? This is where I want to be the love optimism. Exactly. Everything that I'm doing is around love, and yet it's sometimes regarded as not love. But there's tough love, and there's power in love, and you need both, right? And so, if it's assumed that it was done with authority to put you down, you're wrong. It wasn't. You've received it that way. I'm all the intention of the bigger love, the agape love. The question then is, what does that look like at a planetary level where we include key, not just he and she, right, or it? And so, to me, the principles are, how can I bring my whole self to a situation to do the best I can wherever I am bringing my love. And I will inject myself into a group that I don't agree with to bring my love. And I've done that on multiple occasions. And I get applause from half the audience. I get, I'll go away from a couple, and quite often the authority figures shut it down the next time you go to do it because this guy's a threat to status quo. Yep. But the ones that get it know it's being done from love. And this comes back to your social complexity stuff, Sam, that we're not all in the same boat. There's people perceiving they're in different boats, and they judge the other. They don't discern what's needed. And discerning what's needed has to discern who's in the room and who's different. So what I can bring to this is that potentially outside perspective based on deep immersion with you today, as well as hovering over the top and flying over other groups. But when I do it, it's done with love. Please believe that. All right? It's not against you. It's to ask you gently, are you standing in a safe place? Are you aware of these other things? And if other people see me in the wrong place doing the wrong things, please let me know, because I don't know the things I can't see coming, right? So we're all learning together. What I would love to see is a way of demonstrating that to others so they can see the value, because it's the same people, roughly the same people in the same groups. And I saw a little bit of a dilution of what we were doing when others that I knew from other groups came in because they brought other baggage. I saw that happen. There's no point in me living in an echo chamber where I know all the people and know exactly what they're all going to say, right? The change will come through disruptive innovation. And it's how do you disrupt compassionately, disrupt coherence compassionately? And that's love. How do we show there's a better way unless we actually ask people where they're going and show them, if that's where you're going, this is a pathway that I've already been there. Right. Or let's not go there because that doesn't look very good. Thanks everybody for being here. Thank you for introducing me to a Sunday. It's my family just passed by and decided to leave me for the day, so I could probably continue for another 6 hours if anyone wants to keep going. But I'm
sure we could if we let ourselves.
I was 3 or 4 prompts and eventually realised it ain't going to happen. So thank you so much for having me.
I have trouble closing these things because there's so many things. But
thank you.
Yes, I think it's past 1:30 a.m. for Harry. Anyway, so I'll reserve any further comment, and hopefully you all will think about these challenges. Glenn, you have a challenge to write up a summary for this particular one since you committed to it. But
yeah, it's been so rich. It's been so rich. Yeah. Thank you.
Anyway, thank you all for also adapting to the Saturday time. I really appreciate that, and see you next Saturday.
Yeah. Bye-bye.